The 1980s. It was a totally rad decade that was filled with neon, yuppies, and a whole lot of Aquanet.
Welcome to Fantasy Island.
We're going to talk about the news, culture, sports, and entertainment, and all that was weird in the 80s. This is Timeline. We're starting at the beginning with the year 1980. But before we get moving, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below your favorite 80s memory. Okay then, are you ready to relive 1980? 5, 6, 7, 8 Schlemiel, Schlemazel, Hassen Pfeffer Incorporated. We're gonna do it now. Coming out of the disco-filled 70s, the U.S. economy was sagging. Americans were being held hostage in Iran, and the minimum wage was $3.10. But this new decade started off with some promise. Gary Larson's The Far Side made its debut the day before, on New Year's Eve. The year ahead for 1980 would feature many new additions and changes to the culture. The world was about to see its first hot pocket, the rise of the Rubik's Cube, and the dawn of a new political era.
We shall seek new friendships, but we shall not do so by breaking our word or casting aside old friends and allies.
This is 1980. The decade wouldn't start off so great for Beatle Paul McCartney when he was arrested January 16th in Japan for marijuana possession.
What do you think about marijuana?
It was a big mistake.
McCartney would stay in a Tokyo jail for 9 whole days, and it was January 25th when Paul was finally released, and then quickly deported.
I'd like to say sorry about the mistake there, and hope we can come back sometime and not disappoint you next time, and have a good time.
Staying with the music theme, Pink Floyd's 11th album, The Wall, hit #1 on the Billboard charts and would go on to sell over 1.2 million copies in the first 2 months. The album would eventually sell over 30 million copies, which made it the best-selling double album ever. The movie for The Wall wouldn't be released for another 2.5 years, until August 13th, 1982, where at the movies critics Siskel and Ebert gave the film 2 thumbs up. 1980 did ignite what would eventually become a decade-long rivalry of wanting to beat the Soviets at anything. America rose to the challenge at the Winter Olympics in Lake Placid, New York in late February, when the underdog U.S. men's hockey team took out our Cold War foe, the not-quite evil empire USSR, beating them 4-3.
You believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable!
That term evil empire wouldn't be coined until 1983 by Ronald Reagan. That's an extra bonus fun fact for you Rage Against the Machine fans and or New York Yankee haters out there. But no matter what we're calling the Soviets, the budding U.S.-USSR sports rivalry would have to wait.
What you talking about, mister?
Well, Arnold, that's because the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and President Jimmy Carter declared the USA would not participate in the Summer Olympics, which were being held conveniently in Moscow on July 19th, 1980. Da, comrade, da. In between all this Cold War tit-for-tat, some more chilly news as snow fell in Florida in March. This is also notable because this is probably the least weirdest thing ever to happen in the state of Florida. Now for some weird true crime. In mid-March, Jon Favreau's life took a sad turn when he accidentally struck and killed a boy on a mini-bike. This is significant because that boy happened to be Frank Gotti, son of reputed mobster boss John Gotti. Flash forward to later on in the year, on July 28th, when Favreau disappeared, never to be seen again. It would be reported later that one of Gotti's henchmen took Favreau out. Not only did they whack the poor guy, but also pulled a Walter White on him, allegedly dissolving Favreau in a vat of acid. Yikes.
What'd you get me a guitar for?
Because I like the way you sing.
He dragged her from radio station to record shop.
Don't even know where I am half the time.
From honky-tonk bars to the Grand Ole Opry. Sissy Spacek, Tommy Lee Jones.
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you.
Coal miner's daughter.
Now playing at a theater near you.
80s TV loved their season-ending cliffhangers, and none were as big as the episode of Dallas entitled A House Divided, where America's favorite jerk, J.R. Ewing, was shot by a mysterious assailant. The country would have to wait to find out who shot J.R. until 8 months later, on November 21st, 83 million people watched the episode Whodunit.
JR had a lot of enemies.
We found out it was, spoiler alert, dastardly Crispin who had done it.
Get me the police.
I knew it. This episode of Dallas was the most watched regular season TV episode ever. Switching to the radio dial, April 21st, Howard Stern's voice first makes itself heard, hitting the airwaves on station WWWW in Detroit, Michigan.
Give me a break, my wife, we want to have a baby. All I'm asking for is a gig. If you stop listening, I'm in big trouble. Big trouble.
We go on the same day to Boston. And hey, congratulations, and cool that Rosie Ruiz won the 83rd running of the Boston Marathon. All is fine and dandy until Rosie is later disqualified when it's discovered that she only ran the very last mile out of the 26-mile race.
It's not fair.
Not cool, Rosie. Not cool. 3 days later, on April 24th, we go to the Middle East. During military Operation Eagle Claw, a rescue mission intended on freeing American hostages held in Iran, 3 of the 8 rescue helicopters had mechanical problems and the mission was aborted. During the withdrawal, 1 helicopter collided with a plane, killing 8 American soldiers. With the help of Dr. Lottery Balls, Nick Perry, the host of the Pennsylvania lottery scandal, helped rig the TV drawing. The numbers 666 were picked, giving a record payout of $3.5 million, of which $1.2 million went to those in on the scam. April showers not only bring May flowers, but also some new weird historic slang. Chicago Magazine would be the first to introduce the word yuppie into our culture, which appeared in print in their May publication.
Hello?
Friday, the 13th. You may only see it once.
We all remember this part in Goodfellas.
Please, don't you move, you motherfucker. I'll blow your brains out.
That's because on May 11th, the real Henry Hill was arrested for trafficking narcotics. This arrest would prove to be pivotal because Hill would turn rat, becoming an FBI informant and narking out his mob buddies and, well, eventually end up with a movie about it. Thank God, too, because Goodfellas is a really good movie.
It's been a learning experience, but I enjoy challenges, and it's a challenge tonight to see what I can do.
It's mid-May. Los Angeles Laker rookie point guard Irvin Magic Johnson stepped in to play center when starting center Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was too banged up to play in Game 6 of the NBA Finals. The 6'9" Magic would eventually play every position in that game, all while scoring 42 points, grabbing 15 boards, and dishing out 7 assists, helping the Lakers win the NBA championship 4-2 over the Philadelphia 76ers.
What do you have that makes you perform like this in these championship games?
Well, I don't know, just I love to win.
The city of Philadelphia would get some redemption later in the year. As far as Kareem goes, we next land in the Northwest, in Skamania County, Washington, some 70 miles north of Portland, where on May 18th, Mount St. Helens erupted, making it the most disastrous volcanic eruption in U.S. history. Ash was blown as far as 10 miles up into the sky, which then fell back down and blanketed 11 U.S. states, killing crops, creating road closures, as well as blackouts. Video games and pop culture can mark this point when Pac-Man was first released in Japan on May 22nd. Our little yellow buddy would go on to inspire merchandise, sequels, a Saturday morning cartoon, an NFL nickname, and of course, since it is the 80s, a delicious and sugary Pac-Man breakfast cereal, which was basically Kix but with marshmallows. Very clever. Flash forward 2 years to March 1982. We are Fever Pitch Pac-Man. The game is so popular, the song Pac-Man Fever made it all the way up to number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100 in March of 1982. The single sold over 1 million copies in '82 alone for a song about Pac-Man. The 80s. Weird times indeed. Late May of 1980 would feature some now iconic movies.
I am your father.
Here's Johnny.
June would be the birth of the 24/7 news cycle as CNN hit the airwaves for the first time.
Good evening, I'm David Walker.
And I'm Lois Hart. Now here's the news.
CNN's dominance of cable would spawn an array of sibling news channels, as well as competitors, and change our media landscape and the way we would consume news forever.
I have no intention of running for president.
Oh, such innocent times. CNN would have covered this. Legendary comic Richard Pryor, while freebasing drugs and drinking 151 proof rum, maybe accidentally set himself on fire. After running around the streets, literally in fuego, Pryor was subdued by police and rushed to the hospital. Flash forward 2 years on March 24th. Pryor would use this as material for his comedy concert film Live on the Sunset Strip.
I remember this one. It striped the match like this. What's that? Richard Pryor running down the street.
It would be the highest-grossing concert film for almost the entire decade. Almost. We'll see in a minute who upset JoJo Dancer. You would think this would have happened decades, if not a century earlier, but the national anthem of Canada officially became O Canada. We stand on guard for thee.
LA departure frequency 123.9er.
Ah, there's Kareem again.
Roger.
Huh? Clear for Vector 324.
We have clearance, Clarence. Roger, Roger. What's our vector, Victor?
Tower radio clearance, over.
To San Diego on July 2nd, when jam band Grateful Dead members Bob Weir and Mickey Hart witnessed police arresting a fan for possession of marijuana. The two were not so dead chill seeing this and caused such a ruckus that they, along with their manager Danny Rifkin, were arrested and booked for suspicion of inciting a riot. Paulie D of Jersey Shore was born on this date, July 5th, 1980. No reason, we just really wanted to let you know. Your folks were always saying how much harder things used to be. That might be true for thunderstorms, because on July 15th, one massive storm crushed western Wisconsin.
Emergency government officials have now finalized property damage estimates from the storm, and the figures are overwhelming,
racking up for $250 million in damage. We go to Australia. It's August when Lindy Chamberlain's 9-week-old baby, Azaria, was allegedly dragged away from a family campsite by a dingo. However, Lindy and her husband, Michael Chamberlain, were both initially convicted for their child's death. The case made global headlines and was an unintentional creation of 90s humor when we flash forward to November 27, 1991, and the Dingo Ate Your Baby episode of Seinfeld titled The Stranded and becoming part of the pop culture lexicon.
Tell my fiancé I'm looking for him. I have lost my fiancé, the poor baby.
Maybe the dingo ate your baby.
The former Rockets center was born on this day. Good news for his mother, he wasn't born 7'6". In late September, it was a sad day for rock. Following a day where John Bonham, Led Zeppelin's Wonder drummer and notorious party animal, downed a reported 40 measures of vodka in 12 hours, the famed percussionist went and passed out, only to never wake up again. Bonham went on to play that great drum solo in the Cosmos, perishing from asphyxiation, from choking on his own vomit. Flash forward to 2 months later on December 4th, when surviving band members Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, and John Paul Jones decided Zeppelin without Bonham just wouldn't be Zeppelin.
The cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. And it's a story about us, how we achieved our present understanding of the cosmos, how the cosmos has shaped our evolution and our culture, and what our fate may be.
It's September 28th, and sex therapist Dr. Ruth Westheimer's radio show, Sexually Speaking, hit airwaves in New York City.
Question.
Yeah.
I'm having a relationship with a cousin of mine.
Do you use contraceptives?
By 1983, Dr. Ruth's show was the top-rated radio show in the Big Apple. And by 1984, the Dr. Ruth show would mark its syndication starting point.
My show, the only one that touches him is me.
Way to rebound and win, Philly.
This team is just an unbelievable baseball team right now. We could beat anybody in the world.
It's hard to mention the 80s and not talk about the Gipper. Former Western actor and star of Bedtime for Bonzo, Ronald Reagan became President-elect Reagan after defeating incumbent President Jimmy Carter. As you'll see in some coming videos, Reagan's jelly bean-stained fingerprints will be all over the decade to come.
Mexico is showing the world this new way of fighting cancer through non-specific metabolic therapies. God bless you all. Steve McQueen.
He died this morning in another Mexican clinic. His heart stopped beating after doctors removed one of the tumors. McQueen was just 50.
For all the extreme sports fans, we go to West Virginia at the New River Gorge Bridge, which was the starting point of base jumping. Parachutists first jumped off the 876-foot bridge, then presumably landed gently in the New River. We go now to the Superdome in New Orleans. It's round 7 of their second bout between Roberto Duran and Sugar Ray Leonard. A frustrated Duran, unable to keep up with the faster and craftier Sugar Ray, simply turned around and threw in his own towel, saying the now iconic "No mas," stunning the boxing world.
Duran has quit! Roberto Duran has quit! There can be no other explanation!
Leonard was a winner by TKO. America's dad Tom Hanks got his big chance on the sitcom Bosom Buddies, a show about two men dressing up like women in order to save money on rent. The biggest movie star and comedian of the 80s, a then 19-year-old Eddie Murphy, was featured on Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update for the first time. Eddie would quickly become a regular cast member the following year in 1981.
This turkey has the same amount of nutrition as a T-bone steak. But if you compare the two packages like I did, you'll see the steak fits under your clothes a whole lot easier.
In 1988, Eddie Murphy's Raw would go on to top Richard Pryor's Live on the Sunset Strip for highest-grossing concert film.
Lennon was shot and killed at about 11 o'clock last night outside his apartment building.
December would be a punch in the gut to the world's soul when Beatle John Lennon was gunned down outside the Dakota Hotel in New York City. Lennon's album, Double Fantasy, came out 2 weeks prior. Lennon had actually signed a copy of that album to his assailant, Mark David Chapman, just hours earlier. The world mourned. Flash forward to 1985, when a memorial for Lennon called Strawberry Fields made its debut on October 9th. That date would have also celebrated Lennon's 45th birthday.
I'm sorry, these aren't my working clothes.
No, it's not that. It's just that I was expecting someone a little different.
It's December 12th, and California-based company Apple made its initial public offering on the U.S. stock market, which started trading at $22 a share.
You're dead, you're married. Leave the young girls for me.
There's no way I'm going down. I don't go down for nobody.
Listen with him. Why does he have to make it so hard on himself?
And that's how 1980 ended. In with a smoking Beatle, out with a raging bull. 1981 was just around the corner, and it would be a year filled with deadly events, high-profile marriages, and the emergence of the video game. But that's for next time. Good night, John Boy.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
1981. Early into the decade, and things were moving fast.
Okay, units, travel plans. I need to be in New York on Monday, LA on Tuesday, New York on Wednesday, LA on Thursday, New York on Friday. Got it? Got it.
Well, maybe not that fast. Just a year into the budding 80s, 1981 would see a slew of new heroes.
So I'm sure to get most the vitamins I need.
Iconic catchphrases.
Pardon me, would you have any Grey Poupon?
And some of our most important cultural discoveries.
What'd you say this was again?
Today, we're chronicling 1981 from January to December and talking about the news, culture, sports, and entertainment, and all that was weird in the year. This is Timeline. Today, it's all 1981. Now, are you ready to get on to 81?
What's happening?
This is 1981. On January 12th, Dynasty premiered, and America was introduced to the Carringtons, a filthy rich family from Denver, Colorado.
Good evening, Mrs. Carrington. And how has your day been?
Dynasty was created to counter another show about filthy rich people, with the wildly successful Dallas on CBS. Flash forward to December 4th. CBS would counter ABC's Counter with Lorenzo Lamas and the show Falcon Crest, a show about filthy rich people, but this time they're in Napa Valley.
Chase is of the opinion that vineyard is his to keep.
You know you ought to let me handle this.
On January 16th, while claiming he was walking out of a Detroit bar, ex-heavyweight champion Leon Spinks was jumped and cold-cocked by robbers.
Police say Spinks reported his assailants left him naked.
When Leon regained his senses, he found out the muggers had stolen not only $45,000 of jewelry, but also his gold teeth. We're not sure if they got the fillings as well. Sticking with boxing, 3 days later on January 19th, the greatest of all time might apply to Muhammad Ali's non-boxing life, when on January 19th, the ex-heavyweight champ literally talked a man off the ledge. It was in Los Angeles when a despondent man threatened to jump off a high-rise building. Ali drove down to the building and talked to the man, telling him, "You're my brother. I love you, and I couldn't lie to you." Soon after, Ali put his arm around the man and guided him back inside. We'll see Ali again by the end of the year. On January 20th, Iran released 52 Americans who had been held hostage for 444 days, just minutes after the presidency had been passed from Jimmy Carter to Ronald Reagan. The hostages were placed on a plane in Tehran as Reagan delivered his inaugural address.
Some of the hostages are physically and mentally tired. 2 of them are said to be having difficulty walking.
With gull-wing doors and a stainless steel body, the DeLorean was probably the most 80s car ever.
The DeLorean. Gull-wing doors rise effortlessly, beckoning you inside.
The car would be forever etched in our pop culture hearts when Dr. Emmett Brown transformed the DeLorean into a time machine, when Back to the Future premiered on July 3rd, 1985.
88 miles!
February proved that life is indeed a stage as the Canadian power rock trio Rush released Moving Pictures on the 12th. After this, air drumming would never be the same. As the SNL cast took the main stage for their goodnights on February 21st, Charlene Tilton asked Charlie Rocket how he felt being shot. It was a callback to an earlier Dallas skit during the show, where Rocket played the recently assassinated J.R. Ewing.
I'll get that Charlie Rocket if it's the last thing I ever do.
Rocket told Tilton,
"Oh man, it's the first time I've ever been shot in my life. I'd like to know who did it."
Whoops. Rocket was fired before the season finale. On March 30th, in an attempt to impress actress Jodie Foster, John F. Hinckley attempted to assassinate Ronald Reagan. Reagan was shot in the left lung, with the bullet just missing his heart. In the melee, Hinckley also shot a Secret Service agent as well as Press Secretary James Brady, who was hit in the head and critically wounded. James Brady's injury would eventually turn into law.
12 years ago, my life was changed forever by a disturbed young man with a gun.
On November 30th of 1993, President Bill Clinton signed the Brady Bill into law.
Don't tell me this bill will not make a difference. That is not true.
On April 13th, the Washington Post's Janet Cook was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for a feature she wrote titled Jimmy's World. It was the harrowing profile of the life of little Jimmy, an 8-year-old heroin addict. She described the needle marks freckling the baby-smooth skin of his thin brown arms. Shocking, yes. It would have been, if it was true. 2 days after the prize had been awarded, the Post admitted they were duped. Cook resigned and returned her Pulitzer. AAA baseball teams, the Pawtucket Red Sox and the Rochester Red Wings, played the longest game in professional baseball history. The pitching duel went 33 innings and lasted 8 hours and 25 minutes. Over 32 innings were played. By 4 a.m., the players were delirious from exhaustion. With 19 fans left in the bleachers at 4:07 a.m., the game was stopped. The 33rd and final inning was played several months later. Pawtucket won the game 3-2 on June 23, 1981. On April 24, 1980, the Center for Disease Control records that Ken Horn, resident of San Francisco, had Kaposi sarcoma. Later in 1981, the CDC would go back and correct Horn's medical records, retroactively identifying him as the first patient of the AIDS epidemic in the U.S. On May 1st, Billie Jean King didn't so much come out of the closet as she was kicked out by the woman she had a 10-year romantic relationship with while she was married to a man. King, already a world-class tennis champion with 5 Wimbledon titles under her belt when on May 2nd, Marilyn Barnett filed a palimony lawsuit for lifetime support.
But I would never out somebody. Oh my God, that's just horrible.
On May 1st, American Airlines was the first.
We're American Airlines, doing what we do best.
When they launched American Airlines Advantage, the first frequent flyer loyalty program. Money can't buy life were Bob Marley's last words to his son Ziggy. Marley passed from skin cancer. The melanoma had spread from under his toe, a symptom of already existing cancer, not by an injury during a football match as the incorrect reports first stated. Marley was only 36 years old when he passed. Flash forward to 3 years later on May 8th of 1984, when Bob Marley's Legend would be released, which would end up in just about every college student's music collection ever. On May 13th in St. Peter's Square in Vatican City, Mehmet Ali Agca attempted to assassinate Pope John Paul II. The Pope was struck 4 times, suffering severe blood loss. Agca was immediately apprehended. Willing to turn the other cheek, the Pope visited Agca in the prison cell he was to spend the rest of his life. They spoke privately for some time, and the Pope said they became friends. The Pope later requested Agca's pardon in 2000, which Italian officials granted.
He said this week that he'd applied for Polish citizenship, but had been turned down.
Originally written in 1974 for Rod Stewart, Betty Davis Eyes by Kim Carnes would hit #1 on May 16th and stay on the charts for the next 9 weeks.
You'll find McRib in the middle is swimming in sauce. It's McRib.
Very few fast food culinary creations have quite the lore around them as the McRib. A creation of both an animal scientist and a fine dining chef, The McRib is the fast food white whale, appearing seemingly at random and disappearing just as quickly. The McRib would go on to be on and off McDonald's menu for years, first vanishing in 1985.
Only here for a limited time.
But returning in 1994.
This May, it's McDonald's McRib sandwich.
Then doing farewell tours in 2005.
It's McRib time.
2006.
McRib is back.
And 2007.
It's back.
The McRib. It's hard to be sad about something that's gone when it's never really left. A daredevil by the name of Daniel Goodwin climbed the Sears Tower in Chicago, all while wearing a Spider-Man costume on May 25th. Goodwin was able to climb the 1,454-foot, 110-story building, not from being bitten by a radioactive spider, but by using suction cups and hooks. After he triumphantly reached the summit of Sears, Goodwin was greeted with handcuffs. Spider-Man was charged with misconduct, criminal trespass, and criminal damage to property.
Dan Goodwin has captured the imagination of the public as well as Sears.
The month of June featured a mix of famous media moments.
Sometimes I feel I'm scared to live.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
You cannot be serious! That ball was on the line! Chalk flew up!
The Solar Challenger succeeded in completing the 165-mile flight across the English Channel on July 7th. It was the world's first solar-powered airplane to do so. Oh, how sweet it is! Because on the same day, artificial sweetener, or aspartame, was approved by the FDA. 2 days later, on July 9th, the barrel-throwing gorilla, Donkey Kong, made his debut appearance in arcades across America. Creator Shigeru Miyamoto was tasked with redesigning a game called Radar Scope, based on the love triangle between Popeye, Olive Oyl, and Bluto. Nintendo couldn't get the rights to the characters, so the game was repositioned as a gorilla, a carpenter, and his girlfriend. Flash forward to 1982 when Donkey Kong Jr. debuted. The carpenter would be changed to a plumber, and his name was switched to Mr. Video, then Jumpman, and finally Mario. Extra fun fact, Mario was named after Mario Segale, the landlord of a Nintendo warehouse in the Seattle area.
Kurt Russell stars as Snake Plissken in John Carpenter's science fiction action classic, Escape from New York.
On July 17, 1981, two walkways collapsed at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Kansas City, Missouri, one directly above the other. They crashed onto an event with approximately 1,000 guests, which was being held in the hotel's lobby, killing 114 people and injuring 216 others. The OG royal wedding on July 29th was between Lady Diana Spencer and Prince Charles, which was watched by a global TV audience estimated around 750 million people. This storybook franchise would last until August 28th, when Di and Charles's divorce settlement was finalized. Tragedy would strike almost a year to the day later when Di perished in an automobile accident in Paris in late August of 1997.
The Mercedes 600 carrying the princess, her Egyptian companion Dodi El-Fayed, emerged from the tunnel a complete crumpled wreck.
If any network defined the 80s, it was MTV.
This is it. Welcome to MTV Music Television.
On August 1st, they began their run. Back when they actually featured music videos, the network debuted the appropriately titled video, Video Killed the Radio Star.
Brooke Shields. Martin Hewitt. Endless Love.
On August 3rd, 1981, the Air Traffic Controllers Union declared a strike. Reagan declared their strike a peril to national safety and ordered them back to work.
If they do not report for work within 48 hours, they have forfeited their jobs and will be terminated.
Only 1,300 of the nearly 13,000 controllers returned. How did Reagan respond? 2 days later, on August 5th, Reagan fired the 11,345 striking air traffic controllers who had ignored the order and banned them from federal service for life. The great communicator indeed. Staying with Reagan, 1 day later on August 4th, 1981, Oliver North was assigned to the White House's National Security Council, where he served as a lobbyist, focusing his efforts on Central America. We may hear back from Oliver in the coming years. Foreshadowing. The IBM personal computer, commonly known as the IBM PC, was introduced on August 12, 1981.
IBM made its personal computer to help a person be more productive.
If your family owned one in the 80s, you were considered a neighborhood legend.
You know, who knows, it may be the world's biggest backyard fence to talk over before long.
The first woman to the highest court in the United States, Sandra Day O'Connor was nominated to the Supreme Court by President Reagan on August 19th.
The only significant opposition has come from abortion opponents.
The subject of abortion is a valid one, in my view, for legislative action, subject to any constitutional restraints or limitations.
Hanna-Barbera, who shaped America's animated lives with Yogi Bear, the Jetsons, and Hong Kong Phooey, struck blue gold with the introduction of Papa Smurf, Brainy, and Smurfette on September 12, 1981. La 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 la. Now try to get that out of your head.
I'll get you. I'll get all of you if it's the last thing I ever do.
Switching channels, 2 days later on September 14th.
What you are witnessing is real. The People's Court.
The Honorable Judge Joseph Wapner.
If you had the dog on a leash.
Rusty, his faithful bailiff.
I've seen it out of bull in court.
And mild-mannered announcer Doug Llewellyn.
Don't resort to taking the law into your own hands.
With a debut lineup for the long-running People's Court. Los Angeles Dodgers pitcher and rookie phenom Fernando Valenzuela threw his 8th shutout of the season, tying a 68-year-old record set in 1913 by Reb Russell of the Chicago White Sox. Recorded by Olivia Newton-John and released as a single on September 28th, Physical not only flew to #1 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100, it stayed there for 10 weeks, an 80s record. Sticking with music, a relatively unknown multi-instrumentalist by the name of Prince was the opener for the Rolling Stones at the Coliseum in Los Angeles. The Sun-Baked Stones audience was rowdy, booing Prince off the stage, pelting him with bottles, fruit, coins, and food. Flash forward to June 25th, 1984, when Purple Rain would debut. The album would go on to sell over 17 million copies throughout the 80s. On October 20th, the Weather Underground organization, commonly known as the Weather Underground, had 3 of its members arrested after the robbery of a Brinks armored car at the Nanuet Mall in Nanuet, New York. The trio stole $1.6 million in cash, killed a Brinks guard, 2 police officers, and wounded several bystanders. Although Lars Ulrich met James Hetfield 5 months earlier when he answered an ad the drummer placed in The Recycler, looking for other metal musicians to jam with, Metallica became a band on October 28, 1981. The band would play its first gig on March 14, 1982, at Radio City in Anaheim, California, a couple months later after they recruited Dave Mustaine as their lead guitarist. On November 16, 1981, soap opera General Hospital presented the marriage of Luke and Laura, which was watched by 30 million viewers and remains the highest-rated hour in American daytime soap opera history. We go to a yacht off the coast of Catalina Island, where on November 29th, actress Natalie Wood was on a yacht with her husband, actor Robert Wagner, her friend, actor Christopher Walken, and the yacht's captain when she mysteriously disappeared in the middle of the night. Wood's body was found a mile away the next morning, and her death was ruled an accidental drowning, despite a litany of suspicious facts and contradictory accounts from her 3 companions.
Now, we've said from the beginning that we don't think she was knocked unconscious when she went in the water.
The LA County coroner ruled Natalie Wood's death
that it was an accidental drowning.
However, when the case was reopened in 2011, the new report could not conclude whether or not Wood's injuries were accidental.
Wagner and Walken have always maintained they don't know what happened.
Her cause of death was changed from accidental drowning to undetermined. More true crime. After spending nearly 5 months on the run, adult film star John Holmes was arrested in Florida on December 4, 1981. For his involvement in the June 29th home invasion, armed robbery, and murder of a small gang of big-time drug dealers, which would become known as the Wonderland Murders. It was on December 11th Muhammad Ali's days as a boxer ended with a loss to Trevor Berbick. It was estimated that the champ, who was already showing signs of Parkinson's in 1981, had absorbed 200,000 hits during his career.
Unanimous decision for Trevor Berbick.
As far as Trevor Berbick goes, we'll see his part in the boxing record books later, but that's for another year. We're going to 1982 next, where a future sports icon would get his first shot on the biggest stage. A weatherman from Indiana would change late-night TV, and America would start dancing to zombies. Until then, this has been Weird History's Timeline.
Got a deal, good. I'm putting you down to deal with Dick. Dick, what's the deal with the deal? Are we dealing? We're dealing. David's a deal with Dondorf and Dick.
1982. What a year it was. 82 would see some now iconic items taking shape. A gapped-toothed comedian take over late night, the emergence of the war on drugs' most laughable catchphrase, and the rise of the machines. And let's not forget, 1982 would be filled with plenty of spicy drama. We're going to talk about the news, culture, sports, and entertainment, and all that was weird in the 80s. This is Timeline. Today, we're moving on to 1982. Okay then, are you ready to do 82?
My lines! I can't remember my lines, Arthur!
Don't worry, we've got you covered. This is 1982. Starting off in 82, 10-year-old Donnie Priest would be the sole survivor when his mother, Lee Vaughn, and stepfather and pilot, Ron Vaughn, flew a single-engine Grumman AA-5B plane into a snowy slope near the northeastern edge of Yosemite National Park. After spending 5 days in freezing weather, Donnie Priest was found by a search and rescue team. Priest lost both of his legs below the knee due to severe frostbite. Switching to the courts, the Honorable William Ray Overton voted in favor of Act 590 on January 5, 1982, also known as the Arkansas Balanced Treatment Act, which was a law that required the teaching of creationism in classrooms. Kids got a dose of real science with the theory of evolution, Charles Darwin, and genetics, as well as creation myths, Noah's Ark and Adam and Eve. We go to Cuba, where Ubra Blanca was a cow, but not just any cow. Spanish for white udder, Ubra Blanca was known for the enormous amount of milk she produced every day. In Cuba, on January 5, 1982, Ubra Blanca produced 110 liters of milk. That's 29 gallons to us Americans. This really impressed Fidel Castro. He often referred to Ubra Blanca's prodigious output in speeches as evidence of communism's superior breeding skills. Love Rock and Roll was originally recorded by the British band Arrows in 1975. The song went mostly unnoticed until Joan Jett and the Blackhearts recorded their version of it, released as a single on January 19th. Jett's version reached #1 on Billboard's Hot 100 exactly 1 month later, on February 19th. Staying with music, while performing at the Veterans Memorial Auditorium in Des Moines, Iowa on January 20th, during his Diary of a Madman tour, Ozzy Osbourne picked up a fake bat and bit its head off. Well, Ozzy at least thought it was fake. Mark Neal, a 17-year-old fan, threw a real bat on stage, as one apparently does when in Iowa. And due to fog machines, a flashing light show, and lots of drugs, Ozzy picked it up, held it above his head to the crowd, and proceeded to take a batty bite. Neal has said that the bat was already dead when he brought it to the venue, but Ozzy swears the bat bit him first.
We don't want to spend all our time discussing you biting the heads off stuff, but is this okay to be doing this stuff?
Sticking with Dave, on February 1st, David Letterman debuted Late Night, arguably the most exciting, innovative, and insane late-night talk show ever. In its 11 seasons, Letterman would throw crap off buildings, introduce us to stupid pet tricks, and host incredible bands that would have never gotten the chance to perform on television otherwise. His first guest was the one and only Bill Murray.
Dave Letterman, come on, everybody out! Everybody out! Everybody out!
Released on September 13, 1981, it took the Jay Giles Band's Centerfold over 4 months to hit #1 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. But when it did, it stayed there for 6 weeks. Staying on the music theme, by the mid-70s, jazz legend Thelonious Monk had disappeared from the scene he influenced so greatly with his unique improvisational style. More than a complex musician, he was a complex person. Sadly, jazz historians attribute his quirky behavior to manic depression and schizophrenia. Monk died on February 17th. Another sad passing happened in March. Philip Kindred Dick, the world-renowned science fiction writer responsible for some of the genre's most influential work, died on March 2nd. Months later, Blade Runner, which was a film based off the Philip K. Dick novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, debuted on June 25, 1982.
Good evening, I'm Marty McNeely for WGN News. Comic actor John Belushi died today at a rented hotel bungalow in the Hollywood Hills.
While holed up in the Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles, John Belushi would go on the last party bender of his life. Just after midnight, Belushi was visited separately by his friends Robin Williams, Robert De Niro, and Catherine Evelyn Smith, who we'd find out later was the person who injected Belushi with 11 speedballs, which led to his death. Smith eventually served 15 months in prison and was later deported to Canada. Now we go to the New Orleans Superdome, where the North Carolina Tar Heels were down by 1 with less than 20 seconds left in the game. Freshman Mike Jordan then sinks a 16-foot jumper, helping the Heels win the NCAA championship.
Shot! Jordan! Michael Jordan!
On this night, Mike became Michael. We may see this Michael Jordan guy a few more times this decade. Jane Fonda's first exercise video debuted on April 24th, simply titled Workout. Inspired by her best-selling book, Jane Fonda's Workout Book, Fonda brought aerobics to the masses. Next, a music and crime story. While driving his 1977 Porsche Turbo Carrera near Sunset Boulevard, Rod Stewart was approached by an armed gunman in broad daylight. The gunman demanded the keys to Stewart's $50,000 wheels. That's $133,000 converted for inflation. Hopped in the car and sped off, leaving Rod and his 3-year-old daughter, Kimberly, on the curb. It doesn't pay to not pay your taxes. Actress Sophia Loren voluntarily surrendered in Italy and went to jail on May 19th. The charges stemmed from a discrepancy on her 1974 tax return, in which she filed in a lower tax bracket. She then served 17 days of a 30-day jail term in a women's prison. The beloved Satchel Paige. But his exact date of birth was one of the mysteries that came with him into the big leagues when he pitched his first game for the Cleveland Indians after being drafted from the Negro League.
Jack, I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't think it but a very few people in the United States know my age or where I come from even now, let alone know my age, because I've been playing ever since I was a kid. I never had a job. But still, they say I'm 100 years old, and everybody I meet, they say they played ball with me. Some of them's 100, some of them's 85 and 90.
We now go to the courts. On June 15th, the Supreme Court made a landmark decision when it ruled that states cannot constitutionally deny students a free public education on account of their immigration status. The case began in 1977 when 4 immigrant families sued the Tyler, Texas school district after their children were kicked out and then told they had to pay tuition to gain entrance into their schools. Staying with the justice system, on June 21st, having been charged with 13 offenses, would-be assassin John Hinckley was found not guilty by reason of insanity. Hinckley wrote that the assassination attempt was the greatest love offering in the history of the world, in an odd way trying to win actress Jodie Foster's heart.
I believe that it's, that the letters were assumed to have been, love type letters.
But that he was extremely disappointed that Foster didn't accept in return his love for her. During the early 80s, the Soviets were trying to develop a pipeline that would carry natural gas across Siberia. Unfortunately, the Soviets lacked the computer software to manage the pumps, valves, turbines, and storage facilities that a pipeline of this scale would require. The United States had the software, but there was no way in hell Uncle Sam was going to sell the secret sauce to their Cold War foes. So when the CIA found out that the Soviets had been stealing classified government documents for years, they thought it would be the perfect opportunity to add a Trojan horse to their coveted pipeline software. The incorrect software code caused a major explosion of the Trans-Siberian gas pipeline. The result was a blast so monumental, balls of fire could be seen from space. Speaking of space, E.T. fell from the sky and into our hearts on June 11th. By the end of its theatrical run, it had grossed $359 million in North America and $619 million worldwide. At E.T.'s peak, Spielberg was earning $500,000 a day from his back-end stake. The Hershey Company's profits increased by 65% thanks to their product placement of Reese's Pieces. Besides E.T., another alien movie fell from the sky.
For 100,000 years, it was buried in the snow and ice. Now it has found a place to live. Inside.
Next, some baseball news. Cal Ripken Jr. started as shortstop for the Baltimore Orioles on July 1st, 1982. Cal Jr. would go on to play in 2,632 consecutive games, finally ending his streak on September 20th, 1998.
Incredible moment.
An amazing sight, almost overwhelming.
On July 2nd, Larry Walters completed a 45-minute flight with 45 helium-filled weather balloons tied to an ordinary patio chair. Lawn Chair Larry rose to a little over 15,000 feet in altitude by Long Beach, California. Walters took with him a CB radio, sandwiches, beer, of course, a camera, and his pellet gun. The pellet gun naturally would be used to shoot several of the balloons in order to lose altitude and land. Unfortunately, Larry's balloons got tangled up in power lines, and he was arrested after freeing himself from his aircraft. It wasn't all bad, though. Walters' flight would go on to help inspire the 2009 Pixar film, Up. Staying with the movies, tragedy struck the set of Twilight Zone, the movie, when a stunt helicopter crashed, killing actor Vic Morrow and 2 child actors, Micah Din Lee and Renee Shin-Yi Shen, both hired illegally. Director John Landis and 3 others involved with the movie were eventually acquitted of manslaughter charges in a 9-month trial which spanned 1986 and 87.
This is a terrible, terrible accident that obviously will cause pain and anguish to all of us for the rest of our lives.
Steven Spielberg, the co-producer of the movie, was so disgusted by Landis's handling of the situation, he ended their friendship. A moment for video game nostalgia. Atari was the leader in home video game consoles for 5 or so years. But on August 1st, ColecoVision debuted.
Because your vision is our vision. ColecoVision.
The ColecoVision console offered a better user experience, with graphics and gameplay that was closer in comparison to the game systems one would find at a video game arcade. Unfortunately, ColecoVision was discontinued in 1985 when Coleco withdrew from the video game market. On August 27th, Rickey Henderson broke Lou Brock's Major League single-season record by stealing his 130th base in the 3rd inning against the Milwaukee Brewers, where he'd go on to steal 3 more that game. The first commercial compact disc was produced on August 17th. The artist? The classical composer Claudio Arrau, a Chilean pianist best known for his interpretations of 20th century composers. The album? Arrau's 1979 recording of Chopin waltzes. We turn to some true crime. While delivering newspapers between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. on September 5th in Des Moines, Iowa, 12-year-old Johnny Gosch disappeared without a trace, but was presumed to be kidnapped. 2 years later, Gosch, along with another missing boy, Eugene Martin, became the children to be featured on the National Child Safety Council's new Missing Children Milk Carton program in the United States. We go to Monaco. On September 13th, Princess Grace Kelly was driving back to Monaco from her country home in Roquegel when she lost control of her 1971 Rover P6 3500, driving off the steep, winding road. Kelly was taken to the Monaco hospital with injuries to the brain, thorax, and a fractured femur. Doctors surmised that she had suffered a minor stroke while driving. Princess Grace died the following night. A first for pop culture journalism. Although USA Today was first distributed to the Baltimore and Washington, D.C. metropolitan areas on its launch date of September 5, 1982. Scott Fahlman, a computer scientist and professor emeritus at Carnegie Mellon University, used to be part of a primitive online message board with his computer science community. Yes, there were online message boards in 1982, and they were used by Fahlman and his colleagues. The problem? People on this group chat used to pepper in sarcastic comments and jokes. On September 19, 1982 at 11:44 a.m., Fahlman posted this note, which would solve everything. From Scott E. Fahlman. I propose the following character sequence for joke markers: : right parenthesis. Actually, it is probably more economical to mark things that are not jokes, given current trends. For this, use : left parenthesis. Ah, the innocence of it all. The 1982 NFL strike, which began on September 21st, wasn't the first instance when football players walked, but at the time, it was the longest stretch fans went without a game.
A stadium without professional football is about as unusual as a Cleveland winter without snow. A football player strike wouldn't stop the snow, but it would empty out the stadium and a lot of people's pockets as well.
After 57 days, the Players Union and the NFL came to an agreement, and the Washington Redskins eventually went on to beat the Miami Dolphins in a shortened 9-game season. September of 1982 brought some NBC classics.
The precious hours spent in the familiar abode with loved ones playing a heartwarming game such as this are what make memories that one can treasure for all eternity.
When did all that occur to you?
As I was coming down the stairs.
All right. Might as well put on some music. All these weird gadgets, you'd think they'd give you a radio.
What would you like to hear?
What the hell was that?
Staying with TV, on September 24, 1982, Coy and Vance Duke made their debut on the Dukes of Hazzard after the cousins Bo and Luke left Hazzard County to fulfill a lifelong dream of racing on the NASCAR circuit. Well, that's how the show explained it. In reality, John Schneider and Tom Wopat filed a lawsuit against Warner Brothers for $25 million, alleging that Warner had shortchanged them Duke boys on royalties. After Coy and Vance's Season 5 ratings tanked, Warner Brothers ponied up the dough, and Bo and Luke were written back into Season 6. While Coy and Vance, well, Brian Cherry, who played Coy Vance, went on to play Deputy Will Roxy on an episode of Murder, She Wrote. That's cool. We find ourselves in an unsolved crime story. It all started on September 29th, when 12-year-old Mary Ann Kellerman of Elk Grove Village, Illinois, died after taking the over-the-counter pain reliever. Within the next few days, 6 more people died, but it wasn't until 2 Chicago firefighters, Richard Keyworth and Philip Capitelli, realized that all 7 victims had taken extra-strength Tylenol prior to becoming ill. While every bottle of Tylenol was recalled, the only contaminated capsules were found in the Chicago area.
As far as we know, the children's Tylenol, the chewable, have not been implicated yet.
To this day, the culprit has never been caught, but the murders led to new tamper-proof medicine containers and hundreds of copycat attacks. If we go to the parking lot of Tony Roma's in Las Vegas, it was a normal day for Frank Lefty Rosenthal. After getting into his Cadillac Eldorado, Rosenthal noticed flames flickering out of his caddy's dashboard defroster vent. And the next thing he knew, Lefty was rolling around in the parking lot trying to snuff out his suit, which was on fire. Seconds later, Lefty's car blew up. In 1995, Martin Scorsese opened his masterpiece Casino around the assassination attempt. He could have had the food and beverage job, you know.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hey, Naomi, what would you like?
I don't know, you got anything pale and cold?
Yeah, but it's Diane's day off.
Co-founded by former U.S. First Lady Betty Ford, the first Betty Ford Clinic opened on October 4th in Rancho Mirage, California, about 10 miles northwest of Palm Springs. Ford came up with the idea after her own battle with alcohol dependence and diazepam addiction. 10 days later, on October 14th, President Ronald Reagan took a different approach to drugs. He declared a war on them. Later in October, when a 4th grader at Longfellow Elementary School in Oakland, California, asked the First Lady Nancy Reagan what to do if approached by someone offering drugs, Nancy said,
"Just say no."
Just say no to drugs didn't really have an effect on John DeLorean, who was arrested on October 19th by the U.S. government. During a sting operation, DeLorean laughs it up with undercover federal agents, making a sweet $24 million deal to traffic cocaine. DeLorean claims that he only did it to save his failing sports car company. DeLorean would have the last laugh, though. 2 years later, at trial, DeLorean's lawyer successfully argued that the FBI and DEA had targeted and entrapped DeLorean himself, simply because he and the DeLorean Motor Company were financial wrecks. On the car note, Honda became the first Asian car company to produce cars in the United States on November 1st with the opening of the Marysville Auto Plant in the heart of the Buckeye State, Ohio. The first Honda to roll off the floor of the plant was the '82 Honda Accord. And by the way, Marysville, Ohio, Mad River, just wonderful skiing there. To the world of sports. We go to Caesars Palace in Las Vegas on November 13th, where a 21-year-old Ray Boom Boom Mancini was set to defend his WBA lightweight title against the 23-year-old South Korean challenger, Duk-Koo Kim. After 14 brutal rounds, the ring referee called the fight on a TKO, and the victorious Mancini kept his title. Moments later, Kim collapsed and fell into a coma, having suffered a subdural hematoma. Kim died 4 days later. The impact was great. Mancini blamed himself for Kim's death and fell into a deep depression for years. 3 months after the fight, Kim's mother committed suicide. And on July 1st, 1983, the fight's referee, Richard Green, also ended his life. Coming back to music, Michael Jackson released Thriller on November 30th. At its peak, Thriller sold 1 million copies worldwide per week. And by the end of 1983, it became the best-selling album of all time, having sold 32 million copies.
I also forgot to thank Quincy's wife, Peggy Jones. She was a great help on the E.T. album.
You hate to see this happen. On December 6th, Maureen Martyr signed an agreement with Paramount Studios which stated they had the rights to her life story for a cool $2,300. That's a little over $6,100 now. The thing is, Martyr was a construction worker by day and a stripper at night with the dream of one day becoming a professional dancer. When Flashdance debuted and earned a cool $201 million, with none of that cash going into Martyr's pocket. Christos Potamitos was the only guard on duty at the Century Armored Courier Corporation when the company was robbed of $11.4 million, the biggest cash theft in America at the time. It didn't take long for the prosecutors to figure out that Potamitos was the inside man, allowing Eddie Argatakos, his partner in crime, to tie him up to make it look like he was overpowered. Potamitos and Argatakos got 15 years, but the thing is, only $1 million was ever recovered. Prosecutors insisted that Potamitos and Argatakos hid the money before they were convicted, so they could retrieve it if they got caught. Liam Hemsworth, Emma Roberts, and Dwayne Johnson co-starred in Empire State, which was based on the heist. Did anyone actually see that movie? Here's an odd accolade. On December 26, Time magazine named the personal computer its Man of the Year, or in this case, Machine of the Year. Finally, one last sports story. After a sixth-place SEC finish in the '82 season, Paul William Bryant coached his final game at the Liberty Bowl on December 29, 1982, in a 21-15 victory over the University of Illinois. After the game, Bryant was asked what he planned to do now that he was retired. He replied, "Probably croquet a week." He wasn't far off. The beloved coach lived for one more month, dying on January 26, 1983. 1983 was just a few days off. It would be a year where we would see a ride in space, moonwalks, and lucky stars. But that is for next year. You're just going to have to wait a minute or two. 1983. It was a thriller of a year where we would see many highs and lows. From the ugly side of the Cabbage Patch Kids craze to the first man to moonwalk on TV, and a mohawk man with a bad attitude who would pity a fool. While every breath you would take would feel like somebody was watching you, there were some good, clean moments.
Fresh and clean as a whistle. That's Irish Spring.
Today, we're going to talk about the news, culture, sports, and entertainment, and all that was weird in the 80s. This is Timeline. Today, we're on to 1983. Okay then, are you ready to see 83?
Say hello to my little friend!
Good enough for us. This is 1983. We start off with sports. The new United States Football League, or USFL if you're saving time, held its first player draft in New York on January 4th. While the USFL had first crack at all incoming collegiate football players, the incoming rookies shied away from the new league, which was not good news for the league. Dan Marino was drafted in the first round as the first pick by the Los Angeles Express. He declined LA's offer and months later signed with the Miami Dolphins. The USFL would go on for 3 seasons, folding in 1986 after a failed antitrust lawsuit against the NFL, which was led by New Jersey Generals owner Donald J. Trump. A notable weird birth. South Korea says that Kim Jong-un was born on January 8, 1983. North Korean government officials insist that the year was actually 1982. American records show that the year was actually 84. This is the kind of uncertainty that consistently follows North Korea's supreme leader. Kim Jong-un succeeded his late father, Kim Jong-il, in 2011. He also made a friend for life with Dennis Rodman in 2013. With ties to casinos in Las Vegas, Cuba, the Bahamas, and London, Meyer Lansky became one of the most financially successful gangsters in American history. At his peak, Lansky was worth an estimated $20 million. That's over $200 million adjusted for inflation. When he died of lung cancer on January 15, 1983, Lansky had $57,000 to his name.
Maybe you can hire the A-team.
I love it when a plan comes together.
We turn to some tragic music news. Karen Carpenter collapsed in her bedroom at her parents' home in Downey, California on February 4th after years of struggling with anorexia. Paramedics found Carpenter alive, but her heart was only beating once every 10 seconds. She died a couple of hours later at Downey Community Hospital. An autopsy attributed her death to emetine abuse, an ingredient used to induce vomiting. Staying with music. Released as a single 8 months before her 5th studio album, Faster Than the Speed of Night, Bonnie Tyler unleashed the anthemic Total Eclipse of the Heart on February 11th. Written by Jim Steinman, the composer who would go on to write chart-topping power ballads for Meat Loaf, Air Supply, and Celine Dion. Total Eclipse of the Heart went on to #1 on the US Billboard Hot 100 on September 30th, 1983. Staying with pop music, it took 3 months for Michael Jackson's Thriller to touch #1 on the Billboard 200, but once it was there, it stayed for 37 weeks in a row. The record-breaking #1 streak began on February 26th and ended on April 14th, 1984, when the Footloose soundtrack knocked Jackson out of the top spot. Of course, Thriller has staying power. It never left the Billboard 200. Thriller is still on the Billboard 200 chart today. Go ahead, check. We'll wait. Told ya. Channel now to network TV, and after 11 seasons, MASH ended its run with Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen. The series finale was so highly anticipated, CBS sold commercial space in 30-second blocks for $450,000, even more than what NBC was charging for Super Bowl ad space that year. MASH still holds the title for the most watched episode of any television series, with a total audience of 121.6 million people. The 2-hour series finale was the most watched television broadcast in American history until 2010, when Super Bowl 44 came around. For some fashion news, and finally, Swiss design for the people. The plastic swatch debuted in Zurich, Switzerland on March 1st, 1983, when watchmaker Nicholas Hayek responded to the decline in sales of costly Swiss watches. The low price of $40 meant anyone could afford a Swiss timepiece. Nowadays, a Keith Haring swatch fetches over $1,000 on the collector's circuit. Now for some weird weather. On the morning of March 1st, 1983, Los Angeles got hit by a surprise tornado. The twister destroyed homes, cars, businesses, and even ripped off a good chunk of the LA Convention Center's roof. The tornado's path paralleled the 110 freeway for close to 4 miles, tearing a half-mile-wide gash through downtown LA, killing 9 people, seriously injuring 30 more, and flattening 150 buildings. Turning to technology, the first commercial CD player, the iconic Sony CDP-101, beep boop bop beep beep boop, made its first appearance in Japan on October 1st, 1982. Unfortunately, everyone else in the world had to wait until March 19, 1983 to play their $17 compact discs. But after 100 years of popping vinyl and warped tape, Sirius Audiophiles were more than thrilled with the $1,000 price tag for crisp, clean sound with no noise interference, even if the sound was a bit hollow and tinny. In a nationwide television address, President Ronald Reagan announced his proposal for the Strategic Defense Initiative on March 23rd. Reagan claimed that the missile defense system would protect the United States from ballistic nuclear missiles. The following day, the Washington Post quoted an angry Senator Ted Kennedy, who said Reagan's defense proposal was reckless Star Wars schemes. The program's nickname, Star Wars, stuck. Over 10 years, the government spent around $30 billion on developing Reagan's Star Wars, but the program went nowhere. If you were watching it live on March 25th, you remember exactly where you were when Michael Jackson moonwalked across the Civic Auditorium in Pasadena, California. The occasion was Motown 25, Yesterday, Today, Forever, a televised special to celebrate Motown's 25 years in the music business. When Michael Jackson slid across the stage during the guitar break in Billie Jean, it was as if time froze for a second.
Cream eggs from Cadbury. Why, they're the best thing to come along since the Easter Bunny, and when he's gone, they're gone.
We now go to Japan, and after 5 years of planning and construction, Tokyo Disneyland opened on April 15th, the first Disney park to be built outside the United States. Turning to the Middle East, the first embassy suicide bombing occurred in Beirut, Lebanon, on April 18th. The attack killed 32 Lebanese, 17 Americans, and 14 passers-by. It was the deadliest attack on a U.S. diplomatic mission up to that time. In music news, McKinley Morganfield, more commonly known as Muddy Waters, died on April 30th, 1983, at the age of 70. If you're wondering how influential Waters was, consider that the Rolling Stones named themselves after his song Rollin' Stone. And Brian May, Jimi Hendrix, and Angus Young all cited Muddy as one of their biggest influences.
Was the wrong computer.
Shall we play a game?
How can I ask you that?
How about global thermonuclear war?
On June 18th, NASA astronaut Sally Ride became the first American woman in space when she launched with her 4 crewmates aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger. During a pre-launch press conference, Ride dealt with questions like, Will the flight affect your reproductive organs? And do you weep when things go wrong on the job? No one's exactly sure when the Catholic priest James Carney died in Honduras, but records and interviews estimate it to be sometime in July of '83. After being ordained in 1961, Carney was sent to minister to impoverished Hondurans. He eventually became chaplain for the Revolutionary Party of Central American Workers. As the Honduran Army's elite Battalion 316 closed in on the Revolutionary Party, it's reported that Carney was captured, tortured, and thrown to his death from a helicopter. His remains have never been found. Originally titled Black and White and developed for Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder, Trading Places premiered on June 8, 1983. If this featured extra looks familiar, that's Giancarlo Esposito. Giancarlo struck villain gold as Gus Fring, who would first appear on Breaking Bad on May 17, 2009. It was a banner day on July 14, 1983, for an Italian-American plumber. That was the day that Nintendo unleashed Mario Brothers in Japan. North America would get the game about a week later on July 20th. Some weird historical weather? The coldest natural temperature ever recorded at ground level on Earth was minus 128.6 degrees Fahrenheit. For those of you outside of the US, that's negative 89.2 degrees Celsius. The Big Freeze happened on July 21, 1983, at the Soviet Vostok Station in Antarctica. And at that temperature, it would only take a few breaths of air to induce hemorrhaging in your lungs, which would lead to a quick death. To sports, and an afternoon game on July 24, 1983. George Brett hit a 2-run dinger against the Yankees. The only problem for Brett was that his bat's handle was covered in pine tar, and Yankees head coach Billy Martin called it out to the umpires. The umps disallowed the home run, and that's when Brett went ape. Speaking of apes, a black baboon, the first non-human primate conceived in a laboratory dish, was born at the Southwest Foundation for Research and Education in San Antonio, Texas on July 25th. The female baby, named E.T. for embryo transfer, was born 6 months after its test tube fertilization and, coincidentally, on the 5th birthday of Louise Brown, the first human conceived in vitro. For those of you in the regions of America who didn't get their MTV yet, there was Friday Night Videos. The weekly show debuted on July 29th, and it was a godsend for those whose parents didn't want to spring for basic cable yet. The show hung on for 17 years before NBC aired its final episode on December 29, 2000. In a joint initiative between then LAPD Chief Daryl Gates and the Los Angeles Unified School District, the Drug Abuse Resistance Education Program made its debut on September 5th. DARE was a program designed to keep teenagers off of drugs and alcohol. Some of the earliest studies of DARE's effectiveness exposed DARE as being a pretty ineffective program. Turns out teenagers don't like the learn by riveting PowerPoint presentation and prefer the do it and see if we die kind of approach. Back to music. Lucky Star, the 4th single off Madonna's eponymous debut album, was released on September 8, 1983. Madonna initially didn't want to release Lucky Star as a single, but she was in the middle of being sued and needed the money. Warner Brothers executive Jeff Ayeroff, the guy who greenlit Madonna's career, told her to allow him to release the song to earn extra royalties. Ayeroff was right. Lucky Star was Madonna's highest-ranking single on the Billboard Hot 100 off her debut LP.
Yo, Joe! We'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe, American hero.
Get to the citizenship! A few months after he finished filming The Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger took the plunge and became a naturalized U.S. citizen on September 17th. He became one of the rare Americans who also has Austrian rights, as Austria rarely allows dual citizenship. 20 years later, on November 17, 2003, Arnold would use his citizenship to become the governor, being elected the 38th governor of the state of California. Vanessa Williams was the most talked about woman in the world when she became the first African American Miss USA winner on September 17th. In a 1984 issue of Penthouse, the world saw a nude 19-year-old Williams in what became the magazine's most profitable issue ever. Miss USA pageant officials forced Williams to resign. Vanessa would save the best for last when... We flash forward to January 14th, 1992, when Williams would rebound with the release of the song Save the Best for Last, which would make it up to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 list. If you're familiar with the phrase 2 and 2, you've probably seen at least one episode of Love Connection. The dating game show, hosted by Chuck Woolery, who coined the phrase, debuted on September 19th. It was one of the most popular game shows of the 80s, but on July 1st, 1994, after 2,120 shows, Woolery 2 and 2'd for the last time. All in all, Chuck Woolery conducted 35,478 interviews, which produced 31 marriages and 20 children. Now for a notable 1983 moment. With an estimated worth of $2.2 billion, Gordon Getty was ranked the richest man in America according to Forbes in its second annual Forbes 400 list, which was published on September 28, 1983. How did he earn his money? The American way, of course. His father, the late billionaire oil tycoon John Paul Getty, gave him a boost. Today, Gordon is still worth what he was in 1983, $2 billion large. Only now, he's the 212th richest person in the United States. Oof. That poor, poor billionaire. Turning to the theater, on September 21st, David Mamet's Pulitzer Prize-winning Glengarry Glen Ross made its world premiere on the stage of the Royal National Theatre in London. A film adaptation of Mamet's play debuted on October 2nd, 1992, with an expanded script and a new role, Blake, specifically written for Alec Baldwin.
I've been in this business 15 years.
What's your name?
You! That's my name! You know why, mister? Because you drove a Hyundai to get here tonight. I drove an $80,000 BMW. That's my name.
Here's something you didn't realize about the 80s. The world almost experienced Armageddon on September 26, 1983. But thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov of the Soviet Air Defense Forces, you're here watching this video instead. The near-nuclear annihilation happened several weeks after the downing of Korean Airlines Flight 007 over Soviet airspace. An early warning system near Moscow reported the launch of 6 American missiles. Convinced that the U.S. would come at Russia with more than just 6 ICBMs, Petrov halted a retaliatory strike which would have resulted in an immediate and irrevocable escalation to full-scale nuclear war. Flash forward to 1988 when Petrov's actions were finally revealed. Phew! Thank you, Petrov. That was close.
Jonathan Chase, master of the secrets that divide man from animal. Animal from man. Manimal.
A notable ending. The hand-cranked telephone died on October 11, 1983, in the village of Bryant Pond, Maine. While the rest of America was on to rotary and push-button phones by November 18, 1963, Bryant Pond was proud of the fact that it was the last city to fully convert. We go now to South America, some 100 miles north of Venezuela. The United States Marines and a coalition of 6 Caribbean nations attacked the tiny island nation of Grenada at dawn on October 25th. The invasion, codenamed Operation Urgent Fury, resulted in an Allied victory within a little more than a week. Nearly 20 years after it was introduced to Congress, President Ronald Reagan signed a bill marking the 3rd Monday of January as Martin Luther King Jr. Day on November 3rd. Of course, the holiday wouldn't kick in for a few more years. So on January 20th, 1986, America celebrated Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Although by that time, 17 states were already recognizing their own King holiday.
The quarterback. Billy Sims, the deep back, and the toss to Sims. Coming to the near sideline. Cuts upfield. Hurdles over a couple of people.
Oh my goodness, did you see that? He hit Steve Brown with what looked like a karate kick.
While there were signs of mania leading up to it, the Cabbage Patch Kids hysteria began on November 25th, better known to us as Black Friday. Parents would travel hundreds of miles to a toy store if they heard a rumor that a new shipment of Cabbage Patch dolls came in. Coleco's inability to keep up with consumer demand caused fistfights and riots across the United States. The Great Cabbage Patch Kids doll scare of '83 was also the first instance of holiday hysteria that's become a part of America's holiday tradition since. Freddie Heineken became a free man on November 30th after being kidnapped 3 weeks earlier. Heineken, CEO of Heineken Beer, as well as one of the richest people in the Netherlands, was released on a ransom of 35 million Dutch guilders. That's 17,495,961 American dollars. Adjusted for inflation, Heineken's freedom cost a bit over $45 million. It took the 5 kidnappers 5 years to plan the job, and it was the highest ever paid for a kidnap victim at the time. The kidnappers were eventually caught and sent to prison. Crime does pay, you just can't keep it. If you had cable and you were around a TV on December 2nd, you were watching Thriller's debut. John Landis, 16 months after the deaths on his Twilight Zone set, directed the $900,000 video on 35mm film. Former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld met with Saddam Hussein on December 20, 1983, to show America's support for the regime despite its use of chemical weapons. The U.S. was pushing for the Iran-Iraq war to end, and Rumsfeld was sent to the Middle East to serve as a mediator and do the bidding of President Reagan. And that's how 1983 would end. 1984 was just on the horizon. It would be a year for fashion, fast food, and Olympians, but that is for next year. Until then, you can have a snack while you wait for 84 to come.
For a taste that's crispier than ever before. Mrs. Paul's crispier, crunchier fish sticks and fillets.
1984, a year that had been long associated with the George Orwell novel. Now that the real 1984 was upon us, what type of year was it going to be? Would 1984 be an Orwellian dystopian nightmare? Or would 84 be bright, cheery, and nauseating, like a Mary Lou?
You make the call.
Today, we're going to talk about the news, culture, sports, entertainment, and all that was weird in the 80s. This is Timeline. Today, we're on to 1984. Now, are you ready for 84? Okay, let's make sure we keep a hot side hot and a cool side cool.
Keep it hot, hot. Keep it cool, cool. Could be the best tasting lettuce and tomato hamburger ever.
This is 1984.
A good time for crisp hot fry.
Starting off the year, AT&T was forced to break up into 7 smaller regional Baby Bell phone companies on January 1st.
You got any bad news?
Yeah, they told me I was getting laid off this morning.
They don't even try to place these people in the system.
By 2018, like a corporate Galactus, the company had either absorbed or consumed smaller Baby Bell companies, as well as HBO, TBS, CNN, Adult Swim and the Cartoon Network, DC Entertainment, Warner Brothers, New Line Cinema, and soon enough, your soul. Watching the dominoes fall held true, because on January 2nd, Germany's Klaus Friedrich set the world record for domino toppling, with a grand total of 281,581 individual pieces. On January 6th, television's crime-fighting helicopter craze started when Blue Thunder debuted. Blue Thunder had a great cast, with a baby-faced Dana Carvey and former NFLers Bubba Smith and Dick Butkus. 3 weeks later, when America asked the question, how much helicopter entertainment are we willing to accept? Airwolf answered when it flew into our TV viewing hearts on January 22nd. 8 years later, long after Airwolf was canceled, the Airwolf helicopter was sold to a German company, where it became an ambulance helicopter. On June 6, 1992, the chopper crashed during a thunderstorm, killing all 3 crew on board. Turning to music, the release of Van Halen's 1984 on January 9th changed everything for the band. They got a year's worth of chart-topping singles, starting with Jump, and ending with the release of Hot for Teacher on October 27th. Eventually, egos and the success of 1984 destroyed that band, and by July of 1985, Sammy Hagar had replaced Diamond Dave, and that original Van Halen magic was lost forever.
Yes, we know it's a big fluffy bun.
Talk to the manager.
It is the manager.
Hello? Where's the beef?
Staying with fast food, 4 days later, McDonald's Ray Kroc, the man who helped build McDonald's into the multi-billion-dollar fast food empire, died on January 14th. Kroc opened his first McDonald's franchise in 1955 in Chicago. In 1961, he bought out the McDonald's brothers for $2.7 million cash, and by 1965, opened more than 700 restaurants in 44 states. Among the many things that Kroc bought with his fortune were the San Diego Padres. We'll see Los Padres later in the year.
Paul McCartney and his family had arrived back from Barbados, where he'd been fined £70 for possessing a small amount of cannabis.
No, this isn't 1980 repeating itself. On January 15th, almost 4 years to the day after he was busted in Tokyo, Paul McCartney was arrested again for marijuana, only this time for pot possession, while on vacation in Barbados with his wife Linda. Acting on a tip, Barbados police raided McCartney's vacation house and found 10 grams.
Whatever you think and whatever you think I've done, this, I'm telling you, this substance, cannabis, is a whole lot less harmful than rum punch, whiskey, nicotine, and glue, all of which are perfectly legal.
While Paul spent 9 days in jail during his Tokyo bust, the couple was only fined $100 by a Barbados judge. Mary Jane, you've come a long way since '84, baby. 2 days later, on January 17th, the automotive industry would change forever when stylish Dodge Caravan and the edgy Plymouth Voyager debuted. When these first two minivans hit dealership lots, the soccer mom trucksters sold like toilet paper in a pandemic. Chrysler even hired magician Doug Henning to pimp their ride. Apple's dystopian commercial, 1984, directed by Ridley Scott, only aired once nationally, and it was on January 22nd, during the third quarter of the 1984 Super Bowl. Based off of George Orwell's novel 1984, the sledgehammer-wielding woman represented Apple, and Big Brother was IBM, which had dominated the PC market.
We shall prevail.
2 days later, Apple released the Macintosh. With a price tag of $2,495, that's over $6,000 adjusted for inflation today, the Macintosh wasn't all that popular. Many dismissed it as just an expensive toy. 3 days later, Michael Jackson's hair caught on fire on January 27th while he was filming a Pepsi commercial. As Jackson walked down a staircase on stage, a spark from the house pyrotechnics landed on his head, which was unwittingly filled with flammable hair product. Heading into February, we go to space. During NASA's Space Shuttle mission STS-41B on the 7th, astronauts Captain Bruce McCandless and Colonel Robert Stewart made history's first untethered spacewalk. With the aid of 300-pound nitrogen-propelled backpacks, the astronauts made 2 spacewalks during the mission. The first mission lasted 5 hours and 55 minutes, floating a football field's length away from the Space Shuttle Challenger. It was late February when David Vedder, the Houston boy who was confined to a plastic bubble for his entire life due to his severely compromised immune system, died. Vedder wasn't always confined to his bubble, though. NASA built David a hermetically sealed outfit, kind of like an astronaut spacesuit, where he could walk outside without risking infection, but David disliked the suit and only used it 7 times. David was just 12 years old. Moving into March, the United States accused Iraq of using lethal chemical weapons on March 5th against Iran during their 42-month-old war. A statement issued by the State Department said that the weapons were used in violation of the Geneva Protocol of 1925, which Iraq had agreed to in 1931. We go to Melbourne, Australia, where we find a notable first. On March 28th, Zoe Leyland, the first baby born from an embryo frozen after in vitro fertilization, was born. The embryo had been frozen for 2 months. Not very long by today's standards, but it was unheard of at the time. Just for perspective, we flash forward to November of 2017, when Emma Wren Gibson was born. She currently holds the frozen embryo record. She was on ice for 25 years. In late March, William Potts boarded an airplane bound for Miami from New Jersey on March 27th. He gave the flight attendant a note, identifying himself as Lieutenant Spartacus with the Black Liberation Army, and he demanded the plane fly to Havana, Cuba. Potts told the pilot, "We are all going to hell or Cuba." When the plane landed, Cuban authorities put the lid on Potts, charging him with air piracy, and he served 13 years in prison.
Welcome to television's unchallenged authority on wealth, prestige, and success. It's another dazzling Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous.
The Sport of Kings has a new champion. Sly Stallone asks, anyone for polo?
Some better luck news. NYPD Detective Robert Cunningham was eating lunch at South Pizzeria on March 30th when he jokingly asked waitress Philip Penzo if they could split the potential winnings of his lottery ticket instead of tipping her.
The lotto jackpot was $6 million. I said to Phyllis, to get your tip, I'll split my ticket with you.
I picked 3 numbers and he picked 3.
And we hit.
2 days later, Cunningham called Penzo, trying to convince her that they had just won $6 million. She initially didn't believe him due to the fact that it was April Fool's Day. Their haul, $287,715 annually for 21 years each. This was no April Fool's Day prank. On April 1st, tragedy struck the music world when Marvin Gaye was shot and killed by his father.
Marvin Gaye Jr. was taken to California Hospital where he was pronounced dead from gunshot wounds at 1 o'clock this afternoon.
The shooting was brought on by Gaye defending his mother from Marvin Gaye Sr., as the two had been arguing over a missing insurance policy letter. Gaye beat and kicked his father into his bedroom. Moments later, Gaye Sr. entered his son's bedroom with a .38 caliber pistol and shot the singer in the heart at point-blank range. Marvin Gaye was declared dead on arrival at the hospital, 1 day before his 45th birthday. Other sad news in April, iconic landscape photographer Ansel Adams died on April 22nd. Ansel's work and his persistent advocacy for environmental conservation helped expand the national park system. President Jimmy Carter awarded Adams with the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1980. Turning to music news, on May 1st, Mick Fleetwood, drummer for Fleetwood Mac, filed for bankruptcy. The drummer said his financial downfall was caused by bad real estate investments. Oh, and a cocaine addiction that he estimates cost him $8 million. When Fleetwood did the math, he estimated 7 miles of the stuff went up his nose. Take that, Stevie Nicks. An out-of-court settlement was announced on May 7th for veterans who had suffered injury from exposure to Agent Orange during the Vietnam War. When all was said and done, Dow Chemical and 6 other manufacturers paid $184 million to military veterans. Veterans were outraged that the case was settled out of court. The vets felt that they had been betrayed by their lawyers.
Many of my brothers have died when you sat up there and played political bullshit.
Gentlemen, we can't wait 20, 30, 40 years.
The settlement would only give each a maximum of $12,000, spread out over the course of 10 years. Worse than the paltry payout, by accepting the settlement, disabled veterans would be ineligible for other state benefits, such as food stamps, public assistance, and government pensions. 8 days later, after a year of battling an extremely rare type of lung cancer, comedian Andy Kaufman died in Los Angeles on May 16th. His last public appearance was at the premiere of My Breakfast with Blassie, several months earlier in March, where he showed up with a mohawk, looking gaunt and acting more reserved than usual. Kaufman then flew to the Philippines, where as a last resort, he received 6 weeks' worth of psychic surgery treatments, which Kaufman soon realized was a scam. In mid-May, after 9 months of recording and studying Press Your Luck, Michael Larson broke the record for the largest one-day total ever won on a game show.
14,136 on the line. Stop at 4,000.
Larson won $110,237 by gaming the game, memorizing the blinking light patterns to avoid whammies while almost always landing on the bonus boxes. Show producers caught this while this episode was being filmed. CBS initially refused to pay Larson, but they couldn't find a clause in the game's rules to disqualify him. Early in June, Bruce Springsteen released his 7th studio album, Born in the USA, on June 4th. Springsteen earned a Grammy for Best Male Rock Vocal Performance with Dancing in the Dark. The Boss lost the Album of the Year honors to Lionel Richie's Can't Slow Down. But at least Richie gave us the video for Hello, which still is one of the creepiest stalker-themed music videos ever. Speaking of creepy...
This is hot, Ray. Symmetrical book stacking. Just like the Philadelphia Man's Turbulence of 1947.
You're right, no human being would stack books like this.
Listen! You smell something?
In one of sport's greatest winning streaks, Edwin Moses won his 100th 400-meter hurdle race on June 16th at the Budapest Grand Prix track and field meet. In a streak that started in 1977 and ended in 1987, Moses racked up 22 more 400-meter hurdle wins, along with 2 gold Olympic medals. Bored with killing it on the track, Moses soon shifted his focus to bobsledding. He competed as the brakeman for the U.S. bobsled team at the 1990 World Cup in Winterberg, Germany. He picked up a bronze. Turning the dial on the radio, on June 18th, Alan Berg was fatally shot outside his home by 2 members of the white supremacist terror organization called The Order. At the trial for his murder, prosecutors contended that Berg was singled out because he was Jewish, and his personality provoked the anger of white supremacists. Director Oliver Stone's 1988 film adaptation of Eric Bogosian's play Talk Radio would later draw inspiration and storylines from Berg's life. Now for a notable movie first. After complaints about violence and gore in films such as Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Gremlins, the Motion Picture Association of America modified their film rating system on July 1st with the PG-13 rating. Suggested by Steven Spielberg, the PG-13 rating came with the advisory that parents are strongly cautioned to give special guidance for attendance of children under 13. The first film to be released with this rating was Red Dawn a month later on August 10th, 1984. Wolverines! Not only were movie ratings changing, but so too the drinking laws. On July 17th, President Reagan signed the National Minimum Drinking Age Act, a law requiring states to raise their drinking age to 21 or face a 10% cut to their federal highway funding. Every state complied. In late July, America let the games begin as the 1984 Summer Olympics kicked off at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum.
In the name of the athletes, I promise that we shall take part in the Olympic Games, respecting and abiding by the rules that govern them.
Opening ceremonies included O.J. Simpson, Sam the Olympic Eagle, Jetpack Guy, and a badass Olympic song by John Williams. These Olympics were considered to be the most financially successful modern Olympics, serving as a model for future games. That said, decades later, we're still waiting for personal jetpack technology. Not cool. While the money was good for the Olympics, not so much for one of its key sponsors, McDonald's. Marketing executives started to worry that the "When the U.S. wins, you win" campaign could backfire when the Soviets, East Germans, and several other communist nations boycotted the games. Team USA had very little competition and proceeded to crush them. Every time an American Olympian medaled, Ronald McDonald had to cough up free food and drinks. Team USA ended up winning 174 medals. While the Soviets didn't participate in the Olympics, they were always on America's minds. While sound checking for his weekly radio address on August 11th at 9:06 a.m., President Reagan was recorded saying,
"My fellow Americans, I'm pleased to tell you today that I've signed legislation that will outlaw Russia forever. We begin bombing in 5 minutes."
It was Reagan's idea of a joke. He was just improvising off-air with National Public Radio audio engineers before he gave a speech announcing a signature on the Equal Access Act.
And now, here is the host of Jeopardy, Alex Trebek.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of all of us, welcome to America's favorite answer and question game, Jeopardy!
For you toy nerds out there, Transformers made its television debut on September 17th in conjunction with Hasbro's toy line of the same name. It would take less than a year before the Transformers would crush the transforming robot toy market competition, GoBots. Meanwhile, the cartoon would go on to produce 3 animated spin-offs, 3 comic book titles, and a feature-length animated movie.
What was that universal greeting again? Never mind, I remember. Ba weep grana weep ninibon.
Transformers the movie would debut on August 8th, 1986. No one cares about the Michael Bay movies. This would also mark the last role for the legendary Orson Welles, who voiced Unicron.
I will provide you with a new body, a new troops to command, and nothing.
Wells would pass away 1 year later on October 10th, 1985. September of 1984 would see new TV shows that would shape 80s television.
Now, I'm telling you, you are going to try as hard as you can. And you're going to do it because I said so. I am your father. I brought you in this world, and I'll take you out.
5,000 street corners in greater Miami. And Gumby here's got to pick ours.
I don't believe in coincidences, especially when they involve murder or attempted murder.
Turning to sports, Sparky Anderson's Detroit Tigers won the 1984 World Series in 5 games over the San Diego Padres. The series was informally known as the Fast Food Fall Classic, with Ray Kroc owning the Padres and Domino's Pizza founder Tom Monahan owning the Detroit Tigers. That was until 1992 when the Tigers were bought by Mike Ilitch. Ilitch was also the founder and CEO of Little Caesars Pizza. Tigers, pizza, pizza. On October 26th, James Cameron's second film, The Terminator, premiered.
Where is she? Look, it may take a while. If you want to wait, there's a bench over there.
I'll be back.
Flash forward to 1991, when Terminator 2 Judgment Day debuted.
You just can't go around killing people.
Why?
What do you mean, why? 'Cause you can't.
Why?
Because you just can't, okay? Trust me on this.
During the filming of T2, James and star Linda Hamilton would start a relationship only to have it end in 1999 with a juicy $50 million divorce settlement. Hasta la vista, savings. President Reagan trounced Walter Mondale, the Democratic candidate, on November 6th in the 1984 U.S. presidential election. Reagan would sweep 49 out of 50 states with almost 59% of the popular vote over Mondale and his running mate, Geraldine Ferraro.
There's something wrong with you. You're imagining things.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Do you believe in the boogeyman?
No.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Speaking of billions, McDonald's served its 50 billionth hamburger on November 20th, but it wasn't grilled by some high-as-balls teenager. That honor went to McDonald's president and CEO, Ed Renzi, who flipped the patty at New York City's Grand Hyatt Hotel, amidst throngs of TV reporters, journalists, and even a high school marching band. The burger was eaten by Richard J. McDonald, one of the founders, who cooked burger number 1 in San Bernardino, California, 36 years earlier. On the same day as America celebrated the billionth burger, scientists began searching for extraterrestrial intelligence. Tom Pearson of San Francisco State University signed a deal with California's Secretary of State, establishing the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, or SETI, which included 100 scientists among its ranks. 5 days later, on November 25th, 52-year-old William Schroeder became the second human recipient of the Jarvik 7, an artificial heart named after its inventor, Dr. Robert Jarvik, MD. 18 days after the transplant, Schroeder suffered the first in a series of strokes, eventually leaving him in a vegetative state. Schroeder died on August 7, 1986, of a lung infection, 620 days after receiving the Jarvik 7. In late November, musician Bob Geldorf assembled 37 other musicians in a Notting Hill recording studio to record Do They Know It's Christmas, intended on helping famine relief in Ethiopia. Flash forward to December 3rd when the song was released, and it went to number 1 in 16 countries, raising over £8 million. New York was the first state to pass a law which required vehicle occupants to wear seatbelts, a law that came into effect on December 1st.
Cats have 9 lives, children only 1. Help them live that life. Buckle them into a car seat. No one wants a child to become a memory.
A day earlier, on December 2nd, more than 4,000 people were killed and 200,000 more injured after noxious gases leaked from a pesticide plant operated by a Union Carbide subsidiary in India. The incident would later be known as the Bhopal disaster. Over 40 tons of vaporous methyl isocyanate, hydrogen cyanide, monomethylamine, carbon monoxide, and other chemicals were released after an explosion. Flash forward to 2011. Now, with more than 15,000 people who had since died from the effects of the gas, India issued notices to Dow seeking payment of $1.7 billion, which was on top of the $470 million already paid, due to the lingering effects of the poison. In mid-December, Howard Cosell retired from the Monday Night Football broadcasting booth. Our favorite Cosell moment came 8 years earlier, during a Baltimore Colts and Dallas Cowboys broadcast, where Cosell introduced nachos to America. A concession stand in Texas Stadium sent up a plate to Cosell, and he couldn't stop talking about them. Man, nachos do sound good right now.
See?
Just after Christmas on December 27th, geologist Roberta Score found a Martian meteorite while snowmobiling in the Antarctic. Renamed Allen Hills 84001, the meteorite is thought to be one of the oldest Martian meteorites, proposed to have crystallized from molten rock over 4 billion years ago. And it's thought to have originated on Mars during a period when water existed on the planet's surface. A notable birth, the chosen one, LeBron James, was born on December 30th in Akron, Ohio, near Cleveland, a city that suffered decades of sports heartbreak. At age 13, James would first dunk in a basketball game. And on June 19, 2016, James won one for the land, breaking a 52-year championship drought for the city of Cleveland.
Cleveland! This is for you!
1984 would end on a somber music note, when on the afternoon of December 31st, Def Leppard's drummer Rick Allen and his girlfriend were in a car accident on a country road near Sheffield, England. Allen tried to pass another car, misjudged a curve in the road, and crashed his Corvette C4 into a stone wall, flipping the car several times. Because his seatbelt was improperly fastened, it tore off his left arm at the shoulder. Doctors were able to reattach the limb, but the operation failed due to infection. Allen didn't let that deter him. 3 years later, the one-armed drummer returned with Def Leppard on August 3rd in 1987 with the album Hysteria. It was the band's first #1 album and their highest-performing release ever. 1985 was ready to hit 80s prime, a year when we would see a young boxer take his first professional fight, rock and roll being put in the hot seat, and a new game system take America by storm. But you're just going to have to wait for... Get him a body bag! Until next time. Coming soon. 1985. 1985. It was the middle of the decade, and you could feel the 80s finding itself, growing up before our very eyes and becoming its own era. In fact, the 80s was when many of our own viewers grew up. And learning to grow up, it's a universal process. First, there's the lack of dignity. You develop a little attitude.
You just watch your mouth, mister.
And as you get older and wiser, you realize not to take crap from anyone.
It's over. Enough! Enough!
Today, we're going to talk about the news, culture, sports, and entertainment, and all that was weird in the 80s. This is Timeline. Today, the future is going back to the year 1985. Now, how alive was your 85?
I feel tremendous. I'm ready to take on the world. Oh!
This is 1985. 1985 started off on a seemingly positive note when National Geographic published a cover story of Coco the gorilla who learned sign language. Coco got a brand new kitten, which she named All Ball because she thought her new pet looked like a ball. Compared to what my friends have named their pets, she is not the worst name giver. Sadly, All Ball was hit by a car after the kitten escaped Coco's cage the month before, in December of '84. When Coco was informed, she signed the words, "Bad, sad, bad." Frown, cry, frown, sad trouble. It wasn't all sad for Coco, though. A few months later, Francine Patterson, Coco's instructor and caregiver, allowed her to pick out 2 more kittens, which she did, calling them Lipstick and Smokey. In her time, Coco the gorilla became quite the star, meeting celebrities like Robin Williams, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Mr. Rogers. On January 20th, Ronald Reagan began his second term as the President of the United States. If you think Reagan was busy during the first half of the 80s, wait till you see what he does during the next 4 years.
What's that?
Sushi.
You won't accept a guy's tongue in your mouth and you're gonna eat that?
Can I eat?
I don't know. Give it a try.
Moving into early February, the World Chess Championship match in Moscow between Anatoly Karpov and Garry Kasparov ended in controversy when the finals were postponed due to psychological strain. Fast forward to September 3rd when the championship matches were resumed and Kasparov stunned Karpov in the 13-11 defeat. Mickey Mouse made a surprise visit to China on February 19th in honor of Disneyland's 30th anniversary. China became the first stop on Mickey's 30-city Goodwill tour. Fast forward 31 years later to June 16, 2016, when Shanghai gets a Disneyland of its very own, Shanghai Disneyland Park. For scale, the cost of 2 adults and 1 child visiting the park on 2-day weekend tickets would cost the average Chinese adult 1 month's wages. Speaking of children, we go to Bloomington, Indiana, where Hoosier basketball coach Bobby Knight took his childlike temper tantrums to the next level. On Saturday, February 23rd, just 5 minutes into the game against Purdue, Knight lost his on a loose ball foul call and proceeded to throw a chair onto the court. The refs rang Knight up with 2 technical fouls, which ejected him from the game. The Big Ten gave Knight a 1-game suspension with 2 years probation.
So how did she get stuck with a guy like this?
It's you and me, kid.
It's a romantic comedy.
Really looking forward to working with you, kid.
Moonlighting, premiering Sunday, March 3rd.
It doesn't get any weirder than this. Huggies Diapers were awarded the infamous Pig Award on March 3rd, given to them by Women Against Pornography. The feminist group stated that Huggies television ads crossed the line between eye-catching and porn. The Women Against Pornography called out Huggies for its gratuitous creep shot of a mother picking up her newborn baby. Mom leans in and exposes her underwear to the world. Yeah, moving on. 3 days later, on March 6th in Albany, New York, Michael Gerard Tyson made his boxing professional debut. He was only 18 years old when he stepped into the ring. Tyson's first opponent, it was Hector Mercedes. And with a vicious body shot, Tyson quickly wrecked Mercedes with a first-round TKO. Tyson would go on to win 26 of his first 28 fights by KO or TKO, 16 of those coming in the first round. In fact, Tyson's quickest knockout was a year later on July 26, 1986, when Tyson met Joe Frazier's son, Marvis. Tyson KO'd Frazier in 30 seconds.
Uppercut, and Marvis is hurt! Frazier is down!
We'll see more of Iron Mike in the coming years. Back to 85, on March 7th, We Are the World, the charity single for Ethiopian famine relief, written by Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson, was released. It rode the #1 spot for 4 weeks. The song was famously recorded at The Gambler, Kenny Rogers' lion's share recording studio in Hollywood. All of the decade's most iconic voices participated. Stevie Wonder, Bob Dylan, Tina Turner, Bruce Springsteen, and Dan Aykroyd? The only person who overshadowed this all-star recording session didn't even show up to the recording studio. Prince, who was at the peak of his popularity, spent the night hanging out at Carlos and Charlie's, the Sunset Strip nightclub at the time. Prince's night out would make headlines the next day when his bodyguard beat up a paparazzi as he tried to exit the club.
Robotech.
3 days later, the Soviet Union's General Secretary, Konstantin Chernenko, died after a long fight with emphysema and associated lung and heart damage on March 10th. He led the Soviets for just over a year, from February 13th, 1984. Mikhail Gorbachev then took the helm as the Soviets' General Secretary. We'll see a bit more from Mr. Gorbachev later. Going from Russia across the Bering Sea to Alaska, Libby Riddles made history when she became the first woman to win the prestigious Iditarod Trail sled dog race on March 31st. At 29 years old, Riddles mushed her 14 Huskies through 938 miles of snowy cross-country terrain, with a time of 18 days, 20 minutes, and 17 seconds. On the very same day, we go to a sold-out Madison Square Garden, where the very first WrestleMania was seen by 1 million rabid fans. The event consisted of 9 matches, including the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov versus the U.S. Express with Captain Lou Albano, Andre the Giant versus Big John Studd, and somehow Cyndi Lauper became a manager. The main event was a battle for the ages, featuring Hulk Hogan and Mr. T, who doubled up to defeat Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff and Rowdy Roddy Piper.
Madison, he got out!
And of course, who could forget the honorary guest timekeeper that night, Liberace. From New York to China on April 7th, when George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley, the duo better known as Wham, performed in China, being the first band from the West to ever do so. The gig was actually supposed to go to Queen. Freddie Mercury wanted to be the first ever to play China. When Wham's manager heard this, he sent a video of Mercury's flamboyant performances to Chinese authorities. When the event organizers saw Mercury, they opted for Wham, who was presented far more conservatively. Arriving in mid-April, we would see boxer Marvelous Marvin Hagler go toe-to-toe with Tommy the Hitman Hearns at Caesar's Palace. Hagler won in the 3rd round by knockout, and despite only going such a short distance, is still considered to be one of the best fights ever.
Does he get up? He just doesn't know. He can't continue.
On April 23rd, New Coke was introduced to the public, and the public was not okay with a newer, sweeter flavor. After an initial 7% boost in sales the first few days on the market, consumers revolted, and Pepsi gained 14% of Coca-Cola's market share. Fast forward to July, when Coca-Cola executives announced a return to their original formula. Despite the negative press, New Coke stuck around until 2002. On the same day as New Coke, we go back to the USSR, when Mikhail Gorbachev sought to decentralize economic decisions to improve efficiency by making economic reforms known as perestroika. The literal meaning of perestroika is restructuring, referring to the restructuring of the Soviet political and economic system. Fast forward to October 1990, when Gorbachev was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, in part for his pivotal role in ending the Cold War. We go to mid-May, and with an average of 28.2 points per game and magically turning the crappy Bulls into playoff contenders, Michael Jordan was awarded the NBA's Rookie of the Year. Also in 1985, Nike introduced Air Jordans. The shoes were $65 a pair, well over the cost of an average high top at the time. And at first, banned by the NBA. Air Jordans created a shoe-crazed nation and were the coolest high top and 3/4 cut shoes of the decade, and maybe still are. Today, the Jordan brand is worth over $3 billion. On May 20th, the FBI arrested John Anthony Walker, a United States Navy chief warrant officer and communications specialist who had been spying for the Soviet Union since 1968 for $1,000 a week. Walker's ex-wife turned him into the FBI after years of pleading with him to stop. Fast forward to August, when Walker was tried and sentenced to life in prison. Walker died in 2014, 1 year before he was eligible for parole.
No law, no war can stop him. Sylvester Stallone is back as Rambo, First Blood Part 2.
A notable culinary first, bagel bites were invented by tennis partners Bob Mosher and Stanley Garzinski, both from Fort Myers, Florida. The two invested $20,000 into the company and sold $1 million worth of their bites in the first year. On June 1st, when Harold Faltermeyer's Axel F., Beverly Hills Cop's theme song hit number 3 on the Billboard charts. Faltermeyer later said the film's producers originally disliked the direction he was taking the score and wanted to throw the music out. It wasn't until Martin Brest voiced his approval that the studio exec showed enthusiasm about the music. Later in June, Larry McMurtry's Western novel Lonesome Dove was released on the 13th. The story of the relationships between retired Texas Rangers and their Old West adventures was so well received, it inspired a coveted miniseries. Fast forward to February 5th, 1989, when heavy hitters like Robert Duvall, Angelica Houston, and Tommy Lee Jones starred in a television adaptation. But really, who could forget water moccasins?
Water moccasins!
On June 15th, Danae was attacked. Rembrandt's life-size depiction of the character Danae from Greek mythology, the mother of Perseus. Bronius Magus, a Soviet-Lithuanian national later judged insane, threw sulfuric acid on the canvas and cut it twice with a knife. Magus claimed that destroying the painting was his way to champion Lithuania's independence from the USSR. Later, he said he was generally against nude art. So, yeah, thanks, Bronius. In late June, we go to the road, where you could no longer get your kicks, because Route 66, the highway which spanned 2,200 miles from Chicago, Illinois to Santa Monica, California, was officially removed from the United States highway system after it had been replaced in its entirety by segments of the interstate highway system. At the end of June, James Dewar, baker and inventor of the Twinkie, died after a lifetime of working for Hostess Brands Bakery. He started as one of the company's delivery boys in 1920 in a horse-drawn cart, retiring in 1972 as the company's vice president. Dewar became a hero on April 6, 1930 in the snack cake industry when he filled a tube of shortcake with banana cream and called it the Twinkie. During World War II, bananas were rationed and the company was forced to switch to vanilla cream, the flavor we enjoy today. In Houston, Nolan Ryan became the first pitcher to strike out 4,000 batters on July 11th, when the 38-year-old hurler fanned New York Mets outfielder Danny Heath during the bottom of the 6th.
Breaking ball, and that's it. Strikeout number 4,000 for Nolan Ryan.
Considered one of the greatest pitchers ever, Ryan is known for 3 things. He has the current MLB record for most career strikeouts with 5,714. Ryan could hit 100 miles per hour on the radar gun until he retired at 46. And this pummeling of Robin Ventura on August 4th, 1993.
Watch out. Look at this.
Back to 85, and on July 13th, the music industry from England and America hosted simultaneous music festivals at Wembley Stadium in London and John F. Kennedy Stadium in Philadelphia. It was a joint effort to raise funds for relief of the ongoing Ethiopian famine. While musicians like David Bowie, U2, Paul McCartney, and Queen headlined Wembley, the Philly crowd saw a shaky Led Zeppelin reunion, peak Madonna, Mick Jagger with Tina Turner, and Tom Petty. Of course, you also had the show-off. After his set at Wembley Stadium, Phil Collins caught the Concorde and landed in Philadelphia in time to do a second set at JFK. The next month, on August 26th, 13-year-old Ryan White began attending classes at Western Military School in Kokomo, Indiana, via a telephone hookup at his home. Ryan became a national poster child for AIDS in the U.S. after his school administrators barred him from attending classes in person once he acquired the disease from a contaminated blood transfusion. Fast forward a year later to August 31st, 1986, when Ryan enrolled at Hamilton Heights High School in Arcadia, Indiana, after the kids and parents of Western Middle School ran him out of town. Southern Californians were able to sleep a little better on August 31st. That was the day Richard Ramirez was caught, beaten, and handed over to the LAPD by a group of neighborhood locals who spotted the serial killer wandering the streets of East LA. Flash forward to September 20th, 1989, when the Night Stalker was convicted of all charges: 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. Moments after being sentenced to death by gas chamber, Ramirez said, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland." Moving into the 1st of September, after decades of disappointing searches and salvage expeditions, the RMS Titanic was finally found off the coast of Newfoundland. While the ship's wreckage is too unstable and delicate to salvage, divers recovered thousands of items which have been conserved and put on public display. Of course, the Titanic's popularity didn't peak until we... Fast forward to November 1997, when James Cameron's Titanic set sail.
It's been 84 years.
Made of plastic, microchips here and there. She's a small wonder.
Now, you're always a bit ornery, unpleasant, impolite, even downright mean. That's part of your charm. Thank you, you bed-hopping relic.
To Silicon Valley, where Steve Jobs resigned from Apple on September 16th after losing a battle for control of the company with then-CEO John Sculley. The corker is that Jobs poached Sculley from Pepsi because of his marketing genius. The pair ran Apple as co-CEOs, but when Jobs wanted more say in which direction the company would go, Apple's board told Jobs he was too volatile to hold a leadership role. On the same day, Jobs submitted paperwork to the California Secretary of State for the name of his new company, Next Computer. Fast forward to 1997, when Apple would buy Next for $429 million and give Jobs an advisory role back at Apple HQ. Now, when music and politics collide. September 21st, Dee Snider, lead singer of Twisted Sister, testified before the U.S. Senate in defense of music censorship. The Washington Wives, a small group of high-ranking government officials' wives, wanted to give albums ratings, the same way the MPAA rated movies. Hoping he'd embarrass himself, everyone was shocked when Snider, dressed like an 80s rock star Halloween costume, eloquently made a case for uncensored music.
As the creator of Under the Blade, I can say categorically that the only sadomasochism, bondage, and rape in this song is in the mind of Ms. Gore.
The Oregon Trail was first released for the Apple II. It was no Burger Time or Mario Brothers, but as far as personal computer games went, it was okay. Plus, kids learned about the realities of 19th century pioneer life on the Oregon Trail and the many ways to die. Dysentery again? Pac-Man never taught us anything like that. Spurred by a controversial, off-the-cuff remark from Bob Dylan in July during his set for Live Aid in Philadelphia, Willie Nelson, John Mellencamp, and Neil Young took it upon themselves to organize Farm Aid. A wide variety of musicians like Johnny Cash, Tom Petty, Loretta Lynn, Sammy Hagar with Eddie Van Halen, and 50 other A-listers arrived in Champaign, Illinois on September 22nd to help raise over $9 million for America's independent farmers and their families. From the heartland USA to the Soviet bloc, the USSR suffered from a national economic crash during September when Saudi Arabia started rapidly increasing its petroleum extraction. Saudi Arabia's increase in oil production led to a collapse in the price of a barrel of oil, which fell as low as $7. Fast forward to December 26, 1991, when the Supreme Soviet voted the USSR itself out of existence. 5 years after the Saudis' change in oil exporting paved the road for the Soviet Union's collapse.
All right, hot shot. So you got a golden palomino between your knees and no rings. Now what?
To video games. It was on October 18th, Nintendo Entertainment Systems made its North American debut to a small test market in New York City. The first NES gaming system cost your parents $149.99, and it came complete with Super Mario Bros., Duck Hunt, a light gun attachment for Duck Hunt, and an extra controller. And let's not forget, you needed extra lung capacity for blowing on a cartridge just to get a game to work. By 1990, 30% of all American households owned a Nintendo, compared to 23% for homes that had a personal computer. 3 days later, on October 21st, former San Francisco supervisor Dan White was found in his home's garage, dead behind the wheel of his wife's car, less than 6 years after he assassinated San Francisco Mayor George Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk.
Both Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk have been shot and killed.
Oh, Jesus
You may also remember White as the man who defended the murders with what's now mockingly known as the Twinkie defense. White's legal team claimed that White killed Moscone in milk because the former health nut had become addicted to junk food. The jury didn't buy White's Twinkie excuse, and White served 5 years on a soft 7-year sentence. New York Yankees management fired Billy Martin on October 27th, officially ending the Billy the Fourth era of Yankees baseball. It was the 4th time Martin had been fired as the Yankees manager. He never admitted it, but the call most likely came from Steinbrenner, who dealt with Martin's fights, on and off the field, and unpaid debts. Fast forward to 1988, when the Yankees would sign Martin as the season's manager for the 5th time. The 60-year-old manager was fired before the season ended, but while he was in the pinstripes during the '88 season, he never lost his fury. Crack made its first appearance in the New York Times on November 17th, when the paper described it as a superdrug. This wasn't your daddy's cocaine. It was addictive, cheap, and lethal. In the 80s, the drug would devastate black communities, and with tough-on-crime policies as well as the war on drugs, harsh mandatory drug sentencing would be the catalyst for the prison population boom. The nation's response to crack? Fast forward to 1992, when Pee Wee Herman filmed this David Lynchian PSA about the dangers of crack.
Look, everybody wants to be cool, but doing it with crack isn't just wrong. It could be dead wrong.
We're not going to show it. But November 18th marks the day the New York Giants' Lawrence Taylor broke Joe Theismann's leg in 3 during a Monday night football game. It was the live, uncensored graphic rawness that would stick in any viewer's traumatized memory decades after it happened. That day would be Theismann's last day as a football player. Theismann would move on to announcing NFL games, but his big broadcasting moment came when he hosted American Gladiators. Fast forward and to the date of Theismann's injury on November 18th, 2018, when J.J. Watt and Kareem Jackson inflicted the same injury to another Washington quarterback, Alex Smith. Worth noting, as of the making of this video, Alex Smith is returning to the NFL.
Yeah. Now he's worried. You're cutting. You're hurting. You see, he's not a machine. He's a man.
Nieprawda. Moving into December, the Chicago Bears released the Super Bowl Shuffle on the 3rd. Fast forward to February 1st, 1986, when the Super Bowl Shuffle peaked at number 41 on the Billboard Hot 100. For a decade filled with great music. How did that happen? 2 days later, on December 5th, Christopher Forbes, vice president of Forbes magazine, bought a 1787 Chateau Lafite Claret for $157,000. The rare 198-year-old bottle of wine was said to have once been owned by Thomas Jefferson. Glug, 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 glug. Fancy. Fast forward to 2005, when billionaire wine collector Bill Koch, yes, that Koch of the shadowy Koch brothers, bought 4 bottles of 1787 Chateau Lafite from the same batch Forbes bought his bottle. Koch's staff began the process of certifying the 4 bottles and soon found out the entire batch, including Forbes' bottle, were fakes. Glug, 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 glug. Fakes. On December 23rd in Reno, Nevada, 20-year-old James Vance and 18-year-old Ray Belknap shot themselves in an apparent suicide pact. Vance's parents lawyered up and sued Judas Priest, alleging the boys were told to shoot themselves in a subliminal message in an 8-year-old Priest song, Better by You, Better Than Me. July 1990, when Vance and Belknap's lawyers finally got Priest in court. The parents were asking for $6.2 million in damages. Lead singer Rob Halford said if he was ever going to put a subliminal message in his songs, it would be to buy more albums. The judge ultimately decided that the group was not responsible. Turning to true crime, Dian Fossey, one of the foremost primatologists in the world, best known for her study of the mountain gorillas, was found murdered on December 27th in the bedroom of her cabin in Rwanda. 3 years later, Fossey's story would hit the screen.
Universal Pictures and Warner Brothers present Sigourney Weaver, Ryan Brown, in the true story of one woman's incredible courage.
Finally, on the last day of the year, which would end on a somber note, on his way to headline a big New Year's Eve gig in Texas, Rick Nelson died when his plane crashed in a pasture less than 2 miles from a landing strip. Nelson, his girlfriend, and his band died. The two pilots escaped the burning wreckage from the cockpit windows. After a year-long investigation, the National Transportation Safety Board concluded that a definite cause of the crash was unknown. Nelson was 45. 1986 was just around the corner when America would get the need for speed. A human chain would form across the country, and a future media giant show would make its debut. But you're just gonna have to wait until next year. Coming up next, 1986. 1986. We made it.
What should we do now?
86 would feature some of the most iconic 80s moments, from some of the most tragic to some of the most goofy.
That's weird. What the hell is goofy?
1986 would prove to be nothing short of history's Triple Lindy.
Is that hard?
That's impossible. Today, we're going to talk about the news, culture, sports, and entertainment, and all that was weird in the 80s. This is Timeline. Today, we're about to get our fix on 1986. Okay, we hope you look your best.
We got a little tiny zit here on the nose. I was just trying to lance it with this needle.
This is 1986.
This is Jennifer.
1986 started out bad for PC users. On the first, 19-year-old programmer Basit Farooq Alvi and his brother Amjad Farooq Alvi unleashed Brain, the first computer virus to attack MS-DOS. When the brothers created the virus, they were running a computer store out of Pakistan and noticed that their customers were circulating illegal copies of their software. The brothers posted their names, phone numbers, and the shop's address in the virus code, so when someone used the duplicated software, the bootlegger's computer would freeze. The virus spread so fast, the UK and America reported infected computers within days. While we're on the subject of computers, January 16th in San Diego, we would see the Internet Engineering Task Force form, who would develop and coordinate the operation, management, and evolution of the Internet. Their mission was to make the Internet work better by producing high-quality, relevant technical documents that influence the way people design, use, and manage the Internet. And yes, there was an Internet in 1986. The following day, on the 17th, President Reagan signed a secret order authorizing direct U.S. arms shipments to Iran through the CIA and other government connections. The order instructed the CIA not to tell Congress about the operation. In what would soon be called the Iran-Contra affair, this secret U.S. arms deal traded missiles and other weapons in order to free Americans held hostage in Lebanon. But it also used funds from the arms deal to support armed conflict in Nicaragua. We'll be hearing more about that later this year. Switching to space news, this will get some comment.
Voyager 2 passed through its closest approach to Uranus.
The Voyager 2 space probe swept past Uranus on January 24th, coming within 50,679 miles of the seventh planet of the solar system. During its exploration of the planet, the Voyager 2 discovered 10 moons, studied its cold atmosphere, and examined its ring system, discovering 2 new rings. Speaking of science, on the same day, L. Ron Hubbard, failed sci-fi novelist and founder of the Church of Scientology, died.
The body of L. Ron Hubbard was sound and fully capable of serving this mighty Satan for many years.
Although there had been rumors Hubbard had been dead for years, he was really hiding out on his ranch in California to avoid subpoenas. When his death was announced, the Church of Scientology issued a statement that declared that Hubbard's body had become an impediment to his work, and that he had decided to drop his body to continue his research on another planet, having learned how to do it without a body. Cool trick. And moving on. 2 days later, on January 26th, the Chicago Bears crushed the New England Patriots to become Super Bowl champs. These were the Super Bowl Shuffle glory years.
There's no one here that doesn't like me. My Super Bowl Shuffle will set you free.
The sweetness of Walter Payton, the headbands of Jim McMahon, the girth of William the Refrigerator Perry, all led by Ditka. Mike Ditka, the walrus mustachioed head coach, inspired Robert Smigel, Saturday Night Live writer, to create a skit in 1991 called Bill Swirsky's Superfans.
Stop Bears! Stop Bears!
Now for some tragic news. On January 28th, anyone who is alive will remember where they were when the Space Shuttle Challenger blew up some 73 seconds into its mission.
A couple of the solid rocket boosters blew away from the side of the shuttle in an explosion.
The explosion was caused by O-ring seals which weren't designed for the unusually cold conditions during the Challenger's launch that morning. Of the 7 crew members who lost their lives, one of the most well-known was Krista McAuliffe. McAuliffe had been selected for more than 11,000 applicants to participate in NASA's new Teacher in Space program. Going into February, although they technically got started in 1979 as part of the Lucasfilm Computer Division, then known as the Graphics Group, Pixar became its own corporation, with funding from Apple co-founder Steve Jobs, who became the company's majority shareholder. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, on February 7th, President Ferdinand Marcos was caught in a sketchy voters poll scandal in that year's snap presidential election. When the votes were recounted, it showed that Corazon Aquino won with almost 70% of the votes. Moving on to true crime news, Barry Seal, a commercial airline pilot who became a major smuggler for the Medellin drug cartel, was shot to death on February 19th.
He was shot to death outside a Salvation Army halfway house in Baton Rouge, where he had been sentenced to spend the night for 6 months as part of his parole.
Seal gained notoriety when he was busted by the DEA for trafficking guns and drugs for the cartel. Facing a long prison sentence, Seal turned informant by giving the feds intelligence on his Medellin buddies, and also testified in several major drug trials.
I've reached exactly the type of settlement that I wanted to reach. Whether they're happy or not, you'll have to ask them.
When Seal was assassinated, he had only been out on parole for 3 weeks. In 2017, Tom Cruise's American Made debuted with Cruise playing Seal.
That's for the damage. Here's a little something extra for your sister. Hey, little darling, and your back. You never saw me.
You mean you haven't played it yet? We can play it on my Nintendo Entertainment System. It's The Legend of Zelda, and it's really rad. Those creatures from Ganon are pretty bad. Octoroks, Tektites, Levers too. But with your help, our hero pulls through.
Ryan White was readmitted back to school after he tested positive for AIDS after an infected blood transfusion. The day White returned, 151 of the school's 360 students stayed home. At the same time, White was working as a paperboy. Many of the people on his route canceled their subscriptions, believing at the time that AIDS could be transmitted through newsprint. In late February, John Demjanjuk, born Ivan Mikolayevich Demjanjuk, was found in Ohio, where he'd been living since the early 50s, and was extradited to Israel. Known as Ivan the Terrible, Demjanjuk was accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity while serving as a guard at German concentration camps during World War II. Ivan the Terrible would squeak out of a death sentence in Israel, but in 2002, his American citizenship was revoked. Going into mid-March, a notable first, as the American Medical Association ruled that euthanasia is ethical on coma patients. Before this, we had the case of Barber versus Superior Court. At question were 2 doctors honoring a family's request to withdraw both respirator and intravenous feeding and hydration tubes from a comatose patient. The doctors were charged with murder, despite the fact that they were doing what the family wanted. In 1986, reports came in that Pakistan crossed the threshold of weapons-grade uranium production, and by March 1st, the country had produced enough fissile material for a nuclear weapon. Pakistan continued advancing its uranium enrichment program over the years, and according to Pakistani sources, the nation acquired the ability to carry out a nuclear explosion in 1987. Think about that, as Matlock does what he does best.
How long were you U-knowing in the parked car?
Well, from the bottom of the 3rd till the end of the game.
6 innings? You're kidding.
It's Laputa, a floating island.
An island that floats in the sky?
Yep. Most people think it's just a legend, but my dad actually saw it.
On April 8, 1986, Clint Eastwood became the mayor of the small seaside city of Carmel, California. Eastwood decided to run just hours before the deadline to enter the race, after several run-ins with Carmel officials and its mayor. Dirty Harry wanted Carmel to develop business. Incumbent Charlotte Townsend and city officials wanted to keep the seaside town small.
How do you feel your campaign is going so far?
Gosh, can't you ask something original? What am I supposed to say? I think the whole thing has been given an absolutely abnormal tilt by the media presence. We strive as much as we can to live our quiet, private, normal life.
Despite his landslide victory and overall good marks, Eastwood didn't seek re-election, saying he wanted to devote more attention to his children.
I can see the t-shirt now, saying Clint for president. Now when I want to see a movie, some action hard and fast, I just go down to Carmel and watch Clint kick some.
3 days later, aboard the 60-foot sloop American Promise, Dodge Morgan became the first American to sail solo non-stop around the world, a feat in which he cut the previous record time nearly in half. Morgan slipped into the port of St. George, Bermuda, completing the 27,000-mile circumnavigation in 150 days, 1 hour, and 6 minutes. April 15th marked the day the United States began bombing Libya, a mission which was referred to as Operation El Dorado Canyon. The attack was carried out by America's Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps via airstrikes, in retaliation for the West Berlin discotheque bombing 10 days earlier. A 2001 trial in the U.S. found that the nightclub bombing had been planned by the Libyan Intelligence Service and the Libyan Embassy. More bomb-related news, this time in London, took place 2 days later on April 17th when a bomb was discovered in a bag at Heathrow Airport. Later referred to as the Hindawi affair, security found a 3-pound brick of plastic explosives in the bag of Anne Marie Murphy, a 5-month pregnant Irish woman, who was boarding a flight to Tel Aviv with 375 other passengers. Murphy claimed to be unaware of the contents and that she had been given the bag by her fiancé, Nazar Hindawi. Hindawi, who confessed that he was working with Syrian Air Force intelligence, was later caught and sentenced to 45 years in prison. In late April, we go to Boston. It's Game 2 of the first-round series against the Celtics. Michael Jordan scored 63 points, setting a postseason scoring record. Despite Jordan's scoring barrage, the Bulls lost the game in double overtime, 135-131.
Our Miller Lite most valuable player of the game is Michael Jordan with an all-time record 63 points.
Boston eventually swept the 3-game series and went on to win the NBA championship.
But it was an incredible, incredible playoff performance. That wasn't Michael Jordan out there. It was God disguised as Michael Jordan.
The following day, on April 21st, Geraldo Rivera hosted The Mystery of Al Capone's Vaults, a live 2-hour syndicated special.
But over here is the main event. This is what you've come to see, and this is why we're here. This massive concrete chamber, which some believe was built for Al Capone.
For weeks, commercials hyped that Rivera would reveal either Al Capone's great riches, dead bodies, or both on live television. Instead, when the vault was finally opened, the only thing found inside were a few empty moonshine bottles.
And I promised all the critics that if we didn't find anything, I'd sing a song. So, Chicago, Chicago, that toddling town. All right, I'm going.
It was embarrassing for Geraldo, but not as bad as 2 years later. On November 3rd, 1988, when on Geraldo's talk show, a white supremacist broke Geraldo's nose with a chair, marking a point when Geraldo Rivera became synonymous with trash journalism. Saturday, April 26th, at the number 4 reactor at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in northern Ukraine, the core overheated during a safety test, resulting in one of the worst nuclear disasters in history. 2 Chernobyl plant workers died due to the explosion on the night of the accident, and 28 more people died within a few weeks as a result of acute radiation syndrome. The city of Pripyat, the home of Chernobyl, is still uninhabitable and will be for another 20,000 years. The following afternoon, on April 27th, Captain Midnight commandeered HBO's airwaves during the broadcast of The Falcon and the Snowman, in protest of the network's increasingly high $12.95 monthly fee. The protest came in the form of a message on a color bar screen, which stayed on air for 4.5 minutes. The FCC and the FBI quickly caught up with Captain Midnight, a.k.a. John R. McDougal. McDougal was hit with a $5,000 fine, 1 year unsupervised probation, and a 1-year suspension of his amateur radio license, and the respect of a nation.
I feel the need for speed.
Staffers and executive producers at Late Night with David Letterman finally booked Cher on May 22nd. Cher had an outstanding $28,000 Manhattan hotel bill she needed to pay.
Now, do you live in New York now? You live in California?
I've been in a hotel for actually the last couple of months.
By sheer coincidence, a Late Night executive sent another invitation to Cher while she was in New York, and she responded by saying she'd appear on Dave's show for $28,000.
And you want us to cover this? Did we agree to pay for part of it?
Yes.
Cher seemed grateful for the opportunity.
I thought that I would never want to do this show with you.
Now, why? Because you thought I was
an ass.
Hands Across America took place on Sunday, May 25th. In an attempt to link approximately 5 to 6.5 million people hand in hand, literally across America for 15 minutes, forming a continuous human chain across the country. Regardless of the gaps in the chain and execution, Hands was declared a success by everyone involved and raised about $15 million for charities.
Isms, in my opinion, are not good. A person should not believe in an ism. He should believe in himself. I quote John Lennon, "I don't believe in Beatles,
I just believe in me.
On June 8th, Austria chose Kurt Waldheim as their president. Congratulations, Austria. During his campaign, however, Waldheim failed to mention his past as an intelligence officer in Nazi Germany's Wehrmacht during World War II. Oops, sorry. Ultimately, Waldheim's past was outed by witnesses, photographs, medals, and commendations given to him, and by his own signature on documents linked to massacres and deportations. After his term ended in 1992, Waldheim did not seek re-election. But in 1994, Pope John Paul II awarded Waldheim a knighthood in the Order of Pius IX, and his wife a papal honor. What's up with that, JP2? Back to '86 and some tragic sports news. It started when Len Bias was selected as the second overall pick in the 1986 NBA draft by the Boston Celtics.
He had a great career at Maryland. Many people think he may be the best athlete in the draft.
Bias was already anointed to be the next great Celtic. Expectations were set so high, Red Auerbach even said he knew he was going to draft Bias when he saw him play 3 years earlier as a sophomore at Maryland. On June 19th at 8:55 a.m., Bias would be pronounced dead at Leland Memorial Hospital in Riverdale, Maryland, of cardiac arrhythmia related to cocaine use. Staying with sports, let's move to soccer, when on June 22nd, the world witnessed a miracle when Argentine footballer Diego Maradona scored a goal in a quarterfinal match between Argentina and England during the 1986 FIFA World Cup. After the match, Maradona stated that the goal was scored with the help from the hand of God, or the hand of Maradona if you look closely. In 2005, 19 years after scoring the controversial goal, Maradona confessed on a televised program. If I could apologize, go back and change history, I would. But the goal is still a goal. Argentina were proclaimed World Cup champions, and I was the best player in the world. I cannot change the story. 4 days later, in a landmark U.S. Supreme Court decision on June 26th, it was ruled that the insane cannot be executed for their crimes. In government news, the Meese report was released on July 9th.
It is a pleasure today for me to present to Attorney General Meese the following report of the Commission on Pornography.
The report was the result of an investigation into pornography ordered by President Reagan. While the main takeaway from the report was that porn led to sex crimes, most people were just shocked by how explicit some of the descriptions were. Rutledge Hill Press of Nashville sold a book version of the Meese report called Final Report of the Attorney General's Commission on Pornography. The book was deemed so filthy, most bookstores refused to carry it. Moving on to music, July 14th, Motley Crue's Vince Neil began a 30-day jail sentence for vehicular homicide. In December of '84, Hanoi Rocks drummer Nicholas Razzle Dingley jumped into Neil's De Tomaso Pantera, and the two sped off to a local Redondo Beach liquor store. Neil lost control of the car and hit an oncoming vehicle. The two occupants of the other car were injured and suffered brain damage. Dingley was killed. Neil was charged with vehicular manslaughter and driving under the influence of alcohol. His blood alcohol content was 0.17. California's legal limit at the time was 0.10. Beside the 30 days, Neil was forced to pay $2.6 million in restitution and serve 200 hours of community service. Motley Crue dedicated its next album, Theater of Pain, to Dingley. I guess they didn't care about those brain damaged people.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Thanks to an unhealthy weight, dehydration, bad eating habits, and a drug relapse on the Grateful Dead's recent stadium tour, Jerry Garcia collapsed into a diabetic coma, waking up 5 days later on July 15th. Garcia had to learn how to walk and play the guitar again. But by December 15th, the Dead returned to the Oakland Coliseum Arena, where they headlined a series of 3 gigs. Garcia would hang on until August 9th, 1995, when he died 8 days after his 53rd birthday of a heart attack in his room at a rehabilitation clinic near San Francisco.
His life was far more a blessing for all of us, and I think we should, perhaps if we're going to dwell on anything, dwell on that. Thank you.
On August 18th, a 34-year-old John Tesh made his debut appearance on Entertainment Tonight after spending years as a local news anchor and reporter in Nashville and Orlando.
John Tesh will be sitting in this seat from now on, and it sure is fun to be working with you now.
Tesh co-hosted ET for 10 years with Mary Hart, leaving to focus on a career in music where he's released over 60 albums, even doing the theme song for the NBA on NBC.
The success of Star Trek, both motion picture and television show, has blazed the trail for this fall's new Star Trek The Next Generation.
Let's flash forward to April 24th, when Tesh played a holographic Klingon in an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation.
The true test of Klingon strength.
He received no on-screen credit for his cameo appearance, but who couldn't recognize that sexy, sexy forehead? September marked the debut of McDonald's pitch band, Mac Tonight.
When the clock strikes 6:30, babe, time to head for Golden Light.
Originally intended only to air in California for a few months, the popularity of the creepy moon-headed Mac surpassed everyone's expectations. Not only did Mac's campaign go national, it was extended for 4 years until Bobby Darin's son, Dodd Mitchell Darin, sued, claiming McDonald's use of Mac the Knife infringed upon his father's trademark without prior permission. Most interesting, Mac was played by character actor Doug Jones and was his 4th acting gig. Jones would go on to play both Fauno and Pale Man in Pan's Labyrinth, which was released on June 19, 2007. A significant first. In his first major league at bat, Bo Jackson recorded an infield single for the Kansas City Royals on September 3rd. The two-sport Jackson would eventually make his NFL debut with the Los Angeles Raiders on November 1, 1987, against the New England Patriots, where he rushed for a total of 37 yards on 8 carries. We'll see how much Bo knows in the coming years. Another first. On September 8th, The Oprah Winfrey Show was broadcast nationally for the first time ever.
I'm Oprah Winfrey, and welcome to the very first National Oprah Winfrey Show!
The Oprah Winfrey Show would air nationally for 25 seasons, giving us some pretty memorable moments such as Skinny Oprah's Little Red Wagon of Fat, The Oprah Book Club, Oprah's Favorite Things episodes where she'd give her studio audiences cars and houses, and this.
We've never seen you behave this way before.
I know.
Have you ever felt this way before?
Some other notable NBC hits debuted in September.
Good Lord, the gas is on. I forgot to light the oven. Well, I guess we'll have to order in.
We go to Ohio, where in late September, close to 1.5 million balloons were launched from Cleveland's public square. Off they went.
It's completely covering the terminal tower. Look at that!
But a storm turned a balloon fest into a balloon nightmare. Beyond the mess, the balloons caused a local airport's runway to shut down and caused permanent damage to one woman's prized Arabian horses. So many balloons covered Lake Erie that the Coast Guard had to call off a search and rescue mission for 2 fishermen who had been reported missing earlier that day. Into October, and on the 6th, a Soviet submarine called the K-219 was involved in what has become one of the most infamous submarine incidents during the Cold War. Armed with 16 ballistic missiles, each carrying 2 warheads, the K-219 sank about 600 miles east of Bermuda. One of its nuclear reactors had overheated, and Soviet seaman Sergei Preminin manually shut it down, but sealed his death in the process. It was later revealed that highly radioactive plutonium-239 was released in the mishap. After being criticized by the media for inciting violence at their concerts, most recently at a gig at the Long Beach Sports Arena where 40 people were injured during a pre-show gang fight, Run DMC finally called for a day of peace among Los Angeles street gangs on October 8th. The next day, The Phantom of the Opera opened at Her Majesty's Theatre in London on October 9th, starring Michael Crawford in the title role with Sarah Brightman as Christine. Fun Phantom fact, Crawford's mask originally covered his entire face and remained in place throughout his performance, obscuring the actor's vision and muffling his voice. Soon afterwards, Phantom's half mask was designed to replace it, and the musical's unmasking scene was added. On October 9th, The Late Show with Joan Rivers premiered on the new Fox network. It would mark the first time a woman got to host a late-night TV talk show in the U.S. Rivers took the gig because she thought NBC would never give her The Tonight Show, where Rivers would guest host when Johnny Carson took the night off. When Carson found out Rivers jumped ship to Fox, he blacklisted her, and the two friends never spoke again. It was a little after 10 a.m. on October 23rd when Keith Haring began painting a 100-yard-long mural along a portion of the Berlin Wall.
This is probably the most famous and most significant wall because it is a wall that separates and is protected by death or the threat of death to cross it.
The commissioned project was highly publicized and equally risky for Haring. West Berlin policemen shouted at him through bullhorns, taunting that he was in their country without a visa. Haring finished the mural the same day, but the piece didn't last for very long. The mural was soon vandalized and painted over by other artists. It was destroyed by the time the Berlin Wall came down on November 9th, 1991. We go now to the 10th inning of the 6th game of the World Series between the New York Mets and the Boston Red Sox, where on October 25th, Bill Buckner allowed a Mookie Wilson ground ball to pass through his legs.
Little roller up along first, behind the bag!
Buckner's error allowed the Mets to score and win the game. The Mets went on to win the series. Buckner was blamed for the series loss. That and the curse of the Bambino, of course. Moving into November, 3 long years after their first single, Kooky Puss, was independently released, the Beastie Boys dropped License to Ill on November 15th, and the suburbs were never the same again.
License to Kill, right?
That's ill, Joan.
Okay, sorry about this. Their album is called License to Ill. That's a stupid name for an album.
The Beasties' debut LP produced 7 singles, helping it go platinum on February 2nd, 1987, and eventually certified diamond on March 4th, 2015. That's 10 million albums sold. We go to the ring, and with a second-round TKO of Trevor Berbick, Mike Tyson became the youngest heavyweight champion ever, winning the WBC belt on November 22nd. Tyson would go on to unify the heavyweight championship belts, winning the WBA belt with a decision over James Bone Crusher Smith, and the IBF belt with a decision win over Tony Tucker. Being such an iconic 80s figure, you get endorsements. On September 18th, 1987, Nintendo's Mike Tyson's Punch-Out debuted, where you could fight such classic opponents as King Hippo, Mr. Sandman, and Soda Popinski. Back to 86, the Iran-Contra affair erupted on November 25th as President Ronald Reagan and Attorney General Edwin Meese revealed that profits from secret arms sales to Iran had been diverted to Nicaraguan rebels. And finally, on December 17th, American hitman Richard Kuklinski was brought down in a sting set up by the New Jersey Attorney General's office and the ATF.
Unnecessary. These guys watch too many movies.
Kuklinski was given the name the Iceman by authorities after they discovered that he had frozen the body of one of his victims in an attempt to disguise the time of death. In 2003, HBO would pair Kuklinski with forensic psychiatrist Dr. Park Dietz, who analyzed some of Kuklinski's 150 to 200 committed murders. 1986 was now over. 87 was just around the corner, where we would see the fall of famous religious figures, the crude early days of an animated classic, and the greatest crime fighter Detroit ever produced. But that is for next year. Coming soon, 1987. Here we are, 1987. This particular year in the 80s, we would see things take a dark turn. Corruption would be a theme in 87 with a slew of scandals, from political to business to religious.
The flesh is weak, Johnny. Only the soul is immortal.
But who or what could be behind this?
Could it be Satan?
It's possible because in 1987, the Satanic Panic was also sweeping the nation. Hang on tight, because this year is going to be a bumpy ride. We're going to talk about the news, culture, sports, and entertainment, and all that was weird in the 80s. This is Timeline. Today, we're reviving the year 1987. January of 1987 started off with the Rolling Stones' Keith Richards inducting Aretha Franklin to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the first woman to make it into the hall. The induction ceremony was only in its second year and didn't have the clout it has now, so Franklin didn't even bother showing up for the ceremony. But that didn't hold Richards back, who in 1987 was still indulging like he was on the 81 Tattoo You World Tour.
Hey, what can I say about Aretha? I mean, you're in, baby!
3 days later, on January 6th, after the U.S. Senate voted 88-4 to establish an 11-member panel, Congress announced it was opening an investigation into the Iran-Contra affair, starring Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. We'll hear more about the Iran-Contra affair later in the year. The Bangles' Walk Like an Egyptian was already 2 weeks into a 4-week stay at #1 on Billboard's Hot 100. The Los Angeles-based band's biggest hit reached #1 on December 19, 1986, getting bumped on January 16th. Late in January, Pennsylvania State Treasurer R. Bud Dwyer shocked everyone when he took his own life in front of a room full of journalists and government staffers. The 47-year-old Dwyer called a press conference at his suburban Pennsylvania home the day before his sentencing, where he was planning on addressing the 11 counts of conspiracy, mail fraud, perjury, and racketeering that were brought against him. After reading from a 21-page letter he had prepared, Dwyer pulled a handgun out of a manila envelope. He backed up against a nearby wall and said, "Please, please, leave the room if this will affect you." As some ran out of the room to find help, others approached Dwyer to stop him. The news cameras caught everything and the aftermath. Many stations, both in Pennsylvania and nationally, aired segments of the incident. The final week of January, America would see its first condom television campaign, when Trojans and Lifestyles condoms each aired commercials in San Francisco, Detroit, and Indianapolis. Both brands would expand their campaigns, pun intended, to 6 more markets, including Los Angeles. While it might seem odd that the first condom television commercial is noteworthy, consider that the word condom had never been said on primetime television until a month earlier on an episode of Cagney and Lacey. Tyne Daly didn't even get to say the word condom either. She said contraceptive.
Your father is right. Contraception is very important. If you care enough about a girl to make love with her, you should also care enough to keep safe.
10 years without freedom in a land called America.
They say I gotta live with you, eat with you.
On the same day, Ben & Jerry's introduced Cherry Garcia to their stable of ice cream flavors. Ranked as one of their longest-serving and best-selling items, Cherry Garcia was actually thought up by a Grateful Dead fan. Go figure. When Jane Williamson, a sworn Deadhead and ice cream fan, contacted the company and suggested they make a cherry-flavored ice cream and call it Cherry Garcia because, as she said, Dead paraphernalia always sells. And it would be a real hoot for the fans. 2 days later, the late Yul Brynner appeared from the grave in an anti-smoking commercial when he was interviewed on ABC's Good Morning America.
Don't smoke. Whatever you do, just don't smoke.
The somber interview was edited into a simple PSA, per his wishes. Brynner, who started smoking at the age of 12, worked his way up to a 5-pack-a-day habit. He was diagnosed with inoperable lung cancer brought on by heavy smoking in June of 1983, despite quitting in 1971. On February 22nd at 6:32 a.m., Andy Warhol died in his sleep at New York Hospital in Manhattan at the age of 58 while he was recovering from gallbladder surgery. Warhol's career spanned every facet of the arts: commercial illustration, photography, music, movies, commercials, and television. But the artist will always be remembered for his silkscreens, specifically his Campbell's Soup Can series, which ultimately revolutionized the art world, and which were good. Hopping from the east to the west coast, Grimes Posnikov, also known as the Human Jukebox, was ticketed in early March on the San Francisco Wharf for breaking the local noise ordinance. For 15 years, tourists and locals would walk up to the painted refrigerator box Posnikov was hiding in, slip him some loose change, request a song, and the Human Jukebox came to life. It's fair to say that the Human Jukebox was a beloved San Francisco attraction, but the good times ended when Posnikov was cited for playing I Left My Heart in San Francisco, 13 decibels over the legal limit. After being ticketed, Posnikov quit his street performance gig, sold his apartment, and began living on the streets. On March 19th, Jim Baker called it quits, resigning as the chair of the Praise the Lord Ministry, or PTL if you want to get fancy about it, after admitting to a sexual encounter with church secretary Jessica Hahn. Years before, Hahn had been paid the odd sum of $279,000 by the PTL to keep quiet. In late March, the Mobro 4000 barge, filled with 3,168 tons of garbage, set sail on a 6-month voyage along the east coast of North America from Islip, New York to Belize and back. desperately in search of a port to unload its filthy cargo. But because no one wanted any of the New York garbage, the barge was turned away from every dock it tried to stop at. It finally found a home in October, when the barge's trash was dumped and incinerated in Brooklyn. The ash was then hauled to a landfill in Islip, the city where the garbage came from in the first place. After 67 years in show business, Buddy Rich died on April 2nd at the age of 69. Yep, your math is right. Rich was behind a drum kit at the age of 2 in his parents' vaudeville act. He was a child prodigy. By the time he was 4, he was starring on Broadway, and by 15, he was Hollywood's second highest paid child entertainer behind Jackie Coogan. Rich was renowned for his regular appearance on The Tonight Show and The Steve Allen Show, but his greatest appearance was when he went head-to-head with Animal on The Muppet Show. Staying on television, the Fox Broadcasting Company made its primetime debut on April 5th, airing Married with Children, followed by The Tracy Ullman Show, 3 times each. This was the first time since 1955 that there were 4 U.S. television networks with national primetime programming. And speaking of The Tracy Ullman Show, this would be the first time we would see a crude version of The Simpsons on April 19th. When James L. Brooks was working on The Tracy Ullman Show, he asked Matt Groening, a Los Angeles-based cartoonist, if he'd animate his Life in Hell cartoon as short clips between commercials and Ullman's comedy skits. While he was in the lobby waiting to pitch his series to Fox Network execs, Groening realized if he gave the Ullman Show his Life in Hell characters, he'd lose the rights to his life's work. So instead, he created new characters with new storylines right on the spot.
Dad?
Yeah?
What is the mind?
Relax. What is mind? No matter. What is matter? Never mind.
On the same day, California's last free-flying condor was captured by biologists and put into a breeding program after its species was reduced to just 27 remaining birds, all of which were in captivity. It took 6 months of stalking the male condor, officially named AC-9, who was finally caught in Kern County and then driven down to the San Diego Wild Animal Park, where he helped rebuild the condor population. At the time of AC-9's death in 2017, he had played a major role in bringing his species population back up to 270 condors in the wild and close to 450 worldwide. Rebuilding the population, not bad work if you can get it. Joe Hunt founded the Billionaire Boys Club as a Ponzi scheme masquerading as a social and investment club in Los Angeles. But the good times ended when a jury convicted him of murder on April 22nd. Hunt represented himself and was eventually given life without the possibility of parole for the death of Ron Levin, a con artist who had conned the con and stole $4 million. Since Levin's body was never found, Hunt maintains that Levin faked his own death and is still out there somewhere. After being labeled a womanizer by the press, Gary Hart invited journalists to follow him, claiming they'd be bored by what they saw. What they actually found was a relationship between Hart and his campaign aide, Donna Rice. Amid the scandal, Hart pulled out from his second run for president on May 8th.
Have you ever committed adultery? I do not have to answer that question.
In 1987, riding high off their success from a cherry version of their drink, 7-Up released 7-Up Gold, a new cola that looked and tasted nothing like the regular 7-Up. Roger Easley, president of 7-Up at the time, said 7-Up Gold was misunderstood by the consumer, and it was pulled from the shelves by 1989. Of course, the failure of 7-Up Gold had everything to do with poor marketing. People who loved the crisp, clear taste of regular 7-Up were not into a brown, spicy, cinnamon ginger taste of Gold. Some say it actually was and is better than regular 7-Up. I disagree. The best thing to come from the 7-Up Gold disaster was that it gave us this commercial. The pizza delivery guy? It's Kyle Gass of Tenacious D. Mistaken for an Iranian oil tanker, the USS Stark was attacked on May 17th by an Iraqi Mirage fighter in the Persian Gulf. 37 Americans were killed and 21 injured. While President Reagan initially blamed Iran, Iraq apologized and made restitution. A ceremony is now held each year in Florida in honor of the men who perished in the attack. With about 50 hours of flying experience under his belt, 18-year-old Matthias Rust flew his rented Reims Cessna from Utessen, Germany, across northern Europe and landed on the Bolshoi Moskvaretsky Bridge, right next to Red Square near the Kremlin. The stunt, which Rust said was to reduce Cold War tension, cost him 4 years in a Soviet labor camp. He was charged with general hooliganism, breaking aviation law, and illegally crossing the USSR's borders. Lucky for Rust, President Reagan and Gorbachev agreed to sign a treaty to put an end to intermediate-range nuclear weapons in Europe. We'll hear more about this IMF treaty later in the year. But one relevant note, Rust's release was baked into the IMF treaty, and the German teenager was released to the West in August of 1988. From Russia to Liverpool, where Adam Horowitz was arrested after the Beastie Boys' final concert of their British tour at the Royal Court Theatre on May 30th. It only took 10 minutes for the concert to devolve into a full-blown melee. The audience and the Beasties eventually started throwing trash at each other, which is when a woman claims Horowitz threw a beer can at her face. Horowitz was hauled off by the Bobbies and was booked and charged with assault causing grievous bodily harm. He was released the following day on a $16,000 bail, but it turns out the Po-Po got the wrong Beastie. Decades later, Horowitz admitted that Adam Yauch actually threw the beer can, but he took the charge for his buddy, a charge which he was later found innocent. That's a nice Beastie. The same day, the CD video was introduced into the world. CD-ROMs had been around since 1984, so putting information on a small silver disc wasn't completely a new concept. But while CD-ROMs were used for basic computing tasks, the CD video allowed for laserdisc quality video on a compact disc. Unfortunately, because they were recorded in analog, you were only able to get 5 minutes worth of video on a disc. But this technology set the stage for DVDs, which would make their debut 9 years later in Japan on November 1st, 1996.
Want to get Capone? Here's how you get him. He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue. That's the Chicago way. And that's how you get Capone.
Moving on to Colorado, 30 acres of tires were set ablaze on June 9th after they were struck by a bolt of lightning. The fire burned for over a week, producing toxic smoke plumes that could be seen 150 miles away. The 80s would see 3 more tire fires that burned a combined 21 million tires. One of those tire fires started in 1989 in Wales, where 10 million tires burned for 13 years, from 1989 to 2001. 13 years. That's a long time. It's a lot of tires. That's a stubborn fire. 3 days later, on June 12th, President Reagan gave his mic-dropping Berlin Wall speech at the Brandenburg Gate in West Berlin. In front of 2 plates of bulletproof glass, Reagan addressed a crowd, and midway into his speech, he called out Mikhail Gorbachev, saying,
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
When it was all said and done, Gorbachev never did tear down the Berlin Wall. Berliners did it themselves.
Is that? What the f*** is that? What is that, Private Pile?
Sir, jelly donuts, sir!
A jelly donut?
Sir, yes, sir!
Moving into July, the world got its first taste of Richard Branson when he and Per Lindstrand, a Swedish balloonist, broke the hot air balloon record for crossing the Atlantic Ocean when they took off from Maine for Great Britain. Branson and Lindstrand flew the 21-story tall Virgin Atlantic Flyer and made it across the pond, but landed in Northern Ireland due to foggy weather. After taking off again, Lindstrand lost control of the balloon and crash-landed into the Irish Sea. The Royal Navy had to fish them out, but hey, now they're in the Guinness Book of World Records. 4 days later, on July 7th, Oliver North began his televised testimonial in front of a joint congressional committee that was put together to investigate the Iran-Contra scandal. During the July hearings, North admitted that he had lied to Congress, which earned him 16 felony counts. But he went down arguing that he believed that helping the Contras was a good thing. North also admitted that he had misled Congress, for which, along with other actions, he was later charged.
I'm talking to you!
Drop it! Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
In late July, Mary Hart, host of Entertainment Tonight, had her legs insured with Lloyd's of London for $2 million. $1 million per leg. That's right, Mary Hart's legs were a hot commodity in the 80s. Thanks to Entertainment Tonight's camera angles, Hart's legs were always front and center. Months later, Entertainment Tonight changed their set. Behind her new desk, no one could see Hart's legs. This caused a minor outcry from one concerned and possibly creepy fan named Tom from Lake Placid, Florida, who wrote to NBC claiming, "I think I speak for every man who watches your show. The table has to go." On July 30th, Microsoft bought a small software company called Forethought for a cool $14 million. Forethought was only known for developing PowerPoint 3 months earlier, but it was designed for Macintosh computers only. By 1989, PowerPoint became part of the Microsoft Office suite, although Windows users wouldn't get their hands on a PC version until 1990. In the month of August, we go to the ballpark in a game between the Minnesota Twins and the California Angels, where pitcher Joe Niekro got caught doctoring the ball. Home plate umpire Tim Cheetah thought that the pitch to Brian Downing had a bit too much movement on it and told Niekro to show him the ball. After inspecting the ball, Cheetah asked Niekro to empty his pockets. The 43-year-old pitcher was handed a 10-game suspension for cheating. But maybe he should have gotten time served for his brilliant acting on the mound.
He's out of there. He's been kicked out of the game.
We go again to the USSR, where on August 7th, Lynn Cox became the first person to ever brave the ice-cold waters of the Bering Strait to swim from the United States to Russia. It took 2 hours and 16 minutes to swim from the island of Little Diomede in U.S. waters, across the international date line, and arrive at the island of Big Diomede in the Soviet Union. Cox's historic swim helped ease Cold War tensions. Later, when the INF Treaty was signed by the two nations on December 9th, Gorbachev gave her props for her bravery. We'll talk more about this treaty later in the year. Let's stop for a drink in August, where Howard Schultz and a group of investors bought the Starbucks coffee chain from its founder, Jerry Baldwin. At the time, it only consisted of 6 locations. Schultz was inspired by a recent trip to Italy, where small coffee shops were a burgeoning culture all to themselves. Fast forward to June 1992, when Starbucks went public on the stock market with 140 coffee shops. Today, there are over 28,000 Starbucks stores. They must be stopped. Heading into October, the AIDS quilt made its inaugural presentation in Washington, D.C. on the 11th, during the National March on Washington for Lesbian and Gay Rights. The idea of a quilt came from activist Cleve Jones, who wanted the patched blanket to represent people who died of AIDS-related causes but didn't receive funerals due to the social stigma of the disease. Today, the quilt weighs an estimated 54 tons and is considered the largest piece of community folk art in the world. When baby Jessica McClure fell into a well on October 14th, Americans glued themselves to their TVs. CNN reported rescue footage around the clock and even prompted President Reagan to address the ordeal on national television. Jessica was finally pulled out of the well 2 days later.
There she is.
Late in October, the U.S. Navy confirmed that it had trained and deployed dolphins to the Persian Gulf to locate the deadly spiked mines that Iran planted to threaten Gulf shipping. This wasn't the first time Americans acted like Aquaman and used underwater friends for intel. U.S. government officials acknowledged the Navy Marine Mammal Program at the Space and Naval Warfare Systems Command, where they had been training dolphins, seals, and whales, for wartime efforts since 1962. Whitesnake's Is This Love was released October 27th, making it to number 9 on the British UK charts and number 2 in the US, blocked from the number 1 spot by the impossible-to-topple Faith by George Michael. The power ballad was a little sappy, but the video introduced the world to lead singer David Coverdale's model girlfriend, Tawny Katane. Teenage boys around the world rejoiced.
I'm to drive you to Wichita to catch a train?
In late November, Korea Air's Flight 858 vanished off Burma over the Indian Ocean, along with all 115 people on board. It was soon discovered that North Korean agent Kim Hyun-hui and her accomplice planted a time bomb on the South Korean airjet a day earlier, detonating it over the Andaman Sea as it was making its way to Thailand. When the conspirators were caught, they took cyanide. Her male accomplice successfully committed suicide, leaving Hyun-hui on her own during her trial. Eventually, she was sentenced to death, but was later pardoned by the president of South Korea because it was judged that she had been brainwashed by Kim Jong-il and North Korean operatives. We might understand what may have inspired Kim Jong-il in a few minutes. The Boss starred in Stone Cold, which in our opinion is the best movie ever. Well, that and maybe Lawrence of Arabia. It's really close between the two. There's so many similarities, but also some differences. We should meet and talk about it sometime. When KFC opened in Tiananmen Square, Western-style fast food chains were a new thing in China. The success was due more to the novelty than the locals actually loving the food. Staying in Asia, North Korea's Kim Jong-il published an 83-page essay on filmmaking titled The Cinema and Directing. Yes, Kim Jong-il was a serious cinephile. He curated a private collection of approximately 30,000 films that he kept in a climate-controlled vault. He wrote several other academic essays on cinema, and he published On the Art of the Cinema, his opus on North Korean filmmaking. The Supreme Leader's favorite movie? James Bond films, with Sean Connery being his favorite of all the 007s. It was reported that he was heartbroken and deeply insulted when the bad guys in 1991's Die Another Day were the North Koreans. Moving into December, Ronald Clements, James Hardy, and Theron Rowland attacked and killed Stephen Newberry, a Carl Junction High School classmate of theirs, during a time when America was dealing with the early stages of satanic panic. Near the Ozark Mountains, the three boys turned on Newberry. They beat him with baseball bats, then tied a boulder to his body and threw him down a well. When caught one day later, the three boys admitted they did it for two reasons. The first reason was curiosity. They just wondered what it would feel like. The second reason was Satan. Newberry was their human sacrifice. Coming back to the INF Treaty, President Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in Washington, D.C. The treaty stated that America and the Soviet Union agreed to get rid of their reserves of intermediate-range and shorter-range land-based missiles, which had the capacity to carry nuclear warheads. And while there is no data to prove it, we're going to go on record and say Sting's song Russians had something to do with dismantling the Cold War. 10 days later, on December 18th, Final Fantasy made its debut, and the role-playing video game quickly became one of the most influential and successful games for Nintendo. Why was the game called Final Fantasy? The game's creator, Hironobu Sakaguchi, admitted in a 2015 interview that he was prepared to quit the gaming industry and go back to college if the title failed.
The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
Keeping to the theme of greed, Ivan Boesky, who was once considered the financial world's most powerful speculator and the personification of Wall Street excesses, was sentenced to 3 years in prison on December 18th. Boesky also had to pay back $100 million in penalties for conspiring to file false stock trading records. Staying in jail, Lynette Squeaky Fromm escaped from the Alderson Federal Prison for Women in California on December 23rd. Squeaky was serving a life sentence for the attempted assassination of President Gerald Ford. She was captured 2 days later and taken to another women's prison in Texas. What compelled Squeaky to escape? Well, she wanted to visit Charles Manson. And who could blame her? He was so culty cuddly.
They're the world's most fearsome fighting team.
We're really hip.
Just in time for the new year, fluoxetine, also known as Prozac, was approved by the FDA on December 29th. Widely used for depression, it's also shown to be effective in other disorders, including OCD, alcohol dependence, and binge eating. And to close out the year, 1 second was added to the global clock on December 31st to accommodate the slight difference between precise time as measured by atomic clocks and the less than precise observed solar time. And that extra second is how 1987 ended. 1988 was quickly approaching with something. I can't believe what I just saw.
High fly ball into right field. She is gone!
A lip-syncing scandal unfold and the exodus of the Great One. But that is for next year. We hope you find some patience while you wait.
I thought it was the door to love. It was the door to hell!
Coming soon, 1988. 1988, a year when you could feel America was becoming more materialistic. It was out with the old.
Tell him, Ray. Teamwork sucks.
And in with the new.
Are those Bugle Boy jeans that you're wearing?
Oh, yes.
They are Bugle Boy jeans.
Would this turning point be for the worse, or would people see through all of this?
What's your problem?
Today, we're going to talk about the news, culture, sports and entertainment, and all that was weird in the 80s. This is Timeline. Today, we're going double eights with 1988. Now, 1988, we have one thing to say to you.
You are next.
This is 1988.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Before the hangover of New Year's Eve even wore off, the Ashland Oil Company accidentally dumped nearly 1 million gallons of diesel oil into the Monongahela River in Pennsylvania on January 2nd. According to reports, the company's 4 million gallon tank began leaking on its first use due to a dime-sized flaw in its fabrication. Within hours, the oil made its way into the Ohio River, contaminating drinking water for nearly 1 million Ohioans, West Virginians, and Pennsylvanians. Pretty bad. But nothing compared to the great Exxon Valdez oil spill of 1989, when Captain Joseph Hazelwood said, "Hold my beer," and dumped 10.8 million gallons of oil onto the shores of Alaska. But we'll save the rest of that story for our next year. 9 days later, and a couple of states over in Michigan, on January 11th, America's first test tube quintuplets were born. 4 girls and 1 boy to 34-year-old Michelle L'Esperance, a social worker and former model. Fast forward to January 2009, when Southern California's Natalie Suleiman would put L'Esperance and Jacobson to shame by giving birth to 8, count 'em 8, IVF babies and transmogrifying into Octomom. In mid-January, sports commentator Jimmy the Greek Snyder was fired by CBS, where he was a weekly commentator on the NFL Today for 12 seasons, after voicing these comments.
If they take over coaching like everybody wants them to, there's not going to be anything left for the white people. I mean, all the players are black. I mean, the only thing that the whites control is the coaching jobs.
Jimmy.
You don't know diddly.
13-day standoff between a small group of Mormon polygamists and Utah police came to an end on January 28th in a bloody shootout. The standoff began when the fundamentalist group, led by Adam Swap and his mother-in-law, Vicki Singer, bombed a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints chapel in Marion, Utah. Swap and Singer hoped the bombing would lead to the resurrection of John Singer, Swap's father-in-law and Vicki Singer's husband. Instead, roughly 150 cops and FBI agents surrounded the Singer compound for nearly 2 weeks. After 2 armored vehicles stormed the Singer compound, Swap surrendered by waving a white towel drenched in blood. If you're fascinated by armed standoffs led by charismatic cult leaders, wait till we get to the 90s. The following month, on February 12th, while the Cold War was still being waged, the Soviet Union deliberately steered one of their Navy warships into an American warship, the USS Yorktown, after the U.S. was caught passing through Soviet territorial waters in the Black Sea. Technically, the USS Yorktown was in Soviet waters, but it claimed the right of innocent passage. Due to a misinterpretation of the innocent passage laws on both sides, the Soviets sideswiped the trespassers anyway, causing the Americans to redirect their course away from the Black Sea. In the end, both ships floated off in their own directions with minor damage and no casualties on either side. Turning to sports, we go to Calgary, Canada, where the 1988 Winter Olympics opened on February 13th. The games were notable for 3 things. 1. The debut of the Jamaican national bobsled team, which would later be immortalized in 1993's Cool Runnings, starring the late, great John Candy. 2. British underdog ski jumper Eddie the Eagle Edwards. And 3. After 56 years, curling made a comeback. Jimmy Swaggart, the television excessively perspiring evangelist, admitted to getting it on with roadside prostitute Miss Deborah Murphy in Louisiana.
I have sinned against you, my Lord.
You'd think the sins of the flesh would have been a teaching moment for the sweaty Swaggart. But sadly, 3 years later, on October 11th, 1991, Swaggart was caught with another lady of the night, this time near Palm Springs, California. Swaggart told his new congregation at the Family Worship Center,
I'm not going to tell you everything, because the Lord told me it's flat none of your business.
Oh, well, if Jimmy said that the Lord said that it's not our business, let's move on, everybody. Sorry, Jimmy. Speaking of religion and the sex industry, 3 days later, Larry Flynt won the landmark case of Hustler Magazine Inc. versus Falwell. It all started when Jerry Falwell Sr. sued Flint for libel, invasion of privacy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress after Hustler ran a mock Campari liquor ad portraying the evangelist in an incestuous hookup with his mother in an outhouse.
We identified at the bottom of the page that it was an ad parody and that it was not to be taken serious.
DC Follies every Saturday does a TV show on ABC. Saturday Night Live does a TV show. Those political skits permitted to come in court and sue for intentional infliction of emotional distress?
Well played, Hustler. The U.S. Supreme Court, familiar with parody and satire, in an 8-0 ruling, gave the shutout victory to Flint. The 80s, that was some good stuff. When the March winds came blowing in, 3 people became substantially wealthier when the rear door of a Loomis armored truck swung open, dumping more than $1.5 million onto the busy streets of San Francisco. By the time the truck driver returned, a crowd of locals helped recover a little over $1 million, while the mysterious 3 made off with the 460 large. Man, what would you do? On March 12th, Rick Astley's single, Never Gonna Give You Up, finally reached the #1 spot on Billboard's Hot 100 chart after spending 9 months on the top of the charts everywhere else in the world. It was 2007. Some little shit stir started rickrolling people in various 4chan message boards with a video of the song, and a pop star was reborn. By the fall of 2008, we reached peak Astley.
People, let me tell you about him. He's so much fun.
When the blue-eyed soul singer rickrolled the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Back to 1988. On March 13th, John Holmes, star of at least 573 adult movies, who worked under the aliases Johnny Wad, Big John Fallis, and Long John, died at the age of 43 due to complications from AIDS. 2 years earlier, Holmes had been diagnosed HIV positive, although that didn't stop his adult film career. He made several more features, including The Rise of the Roman Empress and The Devil in Mr. Holmes, failing to inform the cast and crew of his illness. Holmes spent the last 5 months of his life in a Los Angeles VA hospital, even being interrogated by LAPD detectives about the Wonderland murders of July 1981.
Where are you? Help them, please.
Sure, I can help them. You gotta help me.
Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice.
It's showtime.
During the NFL's offseason, Herschel Walker, then a running back for the Dallas Cowboys, made his debut as a professional ballet dancer with the Fort Worth Ballet Company on April 10th. Well, Walker didn't really dance as much as he kind of just stood on stage. But it wasn't bad for the 223-pound running back who only took an intro to ballet course as a freshman at the University of Georgia. 2 days later, the United States Patent and Trademark Office issued Harvard the first patent ever for the genetic engineering of an animal. In this case, it was for a mouse. The eggs of Harvard's female mice were injected with an isolated cancer gene, which would then serve as baseline models for cancer research. Nearly 23 years after he and his then-wife, Cher, took I Got You Babe to #1, Sonny Bono won the 7-candidate race and became the mayor of Palm Springs, California on April 12th. At the same time, nearly 360 miles up the Pacific coast, Clint Eastwood had finished up his 2-year stint as the mayor of his hometown of Carmel, California. On the same day, Soviet officials flatly denied the allegations of anything having to do with the mysterious anthrax outbreak on April 2, 1979, which was the world's worst anthrax outbreak within the last century. At the same time, Soviet officials claimed the disaster was caused by the consumption of bad meat, not in a covert Soviet military research lab near Sverdlovsk, Russia, where it really came from. Amidst their denial, it didn't help the Soviets' claim when biochemical engineers with the U.S. Threat Reduction Agency found several hundred tons of weaponized anthrax on the remote Vozrozhdeniye Island in the Aral Sea. Is the world safe from the lab's leaked anthrax? No one's sure. But keep in mind that the anthrax found during the rash of United States Postal Service anthrax attacks in 2001 was from the original strain of anthrax the Soviets buried in 1979. We go to the air, where the United States federal ban on smoking in airplanes began on Sunday, April 23rd. Of course, the ban only applied to domestic flights less than 2 hours in the air, but it was a start. Staying with the airlines, the passengers of Aloha Airlines Flight 243 on April 28th were hanging on for dear life when the roof of their Boeing 737 tore off at 24,000 feet over Honolulu, Hawaii.
There was an explosion, and it started with a hole in the ceiling of the aircraft.
Right next to my feet was just an exposed area, and I could see the ocean below me.
I heard an impact, looked up, and I saw that the plane was falling apart up in the front. Thought we were done.
I thought we lost the pilot and everything, because from my angle, I only saw sky.
Although one flight attendant perished after being sucked out of the fuselage, all 95 passengers survived the 10 long minutes it took pilot Robert A. Schornsteimer to land the topless 737 safely. FAA officials later reported that the cause of the accident was wear and tear, topped off by shoddy inspections and maintenance. And that is why you should always keep your seatbelt fastened. Heading into May, we turn to the art world, where Jackson Pollock's 1955 painting Search sold for a cool $4.8 million. The piece was estimated to be painted within the last year of his life, a dark period for the artist who rarely created any work during the last 3 years of his life due to alcoholism and depression. But that wasn't even the most expensive painting sold in 1988. That honor would go to Pablo Picasso when his masterpiece sold for $38.5 million. That's $83.3 million adjusted for inflation. On the same day, we turn to sports. Former player turned Cincinnati Reds manager Pete Rose received a 30-day suspension after he was thrown out of a game for bumping first base umpire Dave Pallone. Irate hometown fans threw radios, batteries, cigarette lighters, and maybe even some Skyline chili onto the field. It got so bad, Reds owner Marge Schott had to post a message onto Riverfront Stadium's electronic billboard asking fans to stop throwing crap. The following day, White House officials denied that President Reagan had ever been influenced by astrology, but that may not apply to all the Reagans. White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater threw First Lady Nancy Reagan under the bus, saying that she had consulted an astrologer on the president's travel and scheduling plans. Then, former White House Chief of Staff Donald Regan said Nancy regularly consulted an astrologer in pretty much every major decision, including when the president signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty at exactly 1:30 p.m. on December 8, 1987. Reagan, a total Aquarius. Later in the month, on May 14th, a school bus full of teens and their youth group leaders collided in a head-on collision on their way home from Kings Island Theme Park in Mason, Ohio. The accident happened as the church youth group was heading back home to Radcliffe, Kentucky, southbound on Interstate 71. Larry Wayne Mahoney drove his pickup truck northbound on the wrong side of the road and into the bus. 24 teens and 3 adults died in the collision. Mahoney lived. Upon inspection, local police found a cold 12-pack of Miller Lite in Mahoney's truck. Several family members of the victims of the crash became prominent leaders in Mothers Against Drunk Driving, including Carolyn Nunnally, who went on to become MAD's president. In slightly better news, the withdrawal of Soviet military forces from Afghanistan began on May 15th, more than 8 years after the USSR attempted to support their pro-communist, pro-Soviet government.
The next major turning point in the history of all civilization.
Hi! The publishers of Consumer Reports magazine submitted a petition to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration requesting that the agency ban the Suzuki Samurai. The petition was filed after the publication road tested the vehicle, calling it wholly unsuitable for consumer use due to its propensity to roll over during some fairly basic maneuvers at 40 miles an hour.
Drink the drink.
But I don't want the drink.
He doesn't want the drink. You do.
I don't.
You do.
I don't.
You don't.
I do.
You don't.
I do.
You don't.
Listen, when I say I do, that means I do.
2 days later, Milli Vanilli dropped the single Girl You Know It's True on June 25th, which was also the title track off their American debut LP. The single flew up the charts, peaking at number 1 on the German singles chart, number 2 on the US Billboard Hot 100, and number 3 on the UK singles chart. But what goes up must be lip-synced. A year later, on July 21st, 1989, it all came crashing down for Rob Pilatus and Fab Morvan, the lead singers of Milli Vanilli. In short, the hard drive of the device that was playing Girl You Know It's True malfunctioned, causing the song to skip and sending Rob and Fab backstage in embarrassment and fear. The National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences revoked Milli Vanilli's Grammy for Best New Artist, and people who bought the album and went to their concerts filed lawsuits. Eventually, Rob and Fab split, but not until after a desperate attempt to salvage their career in a spectacularly embarrassing press conference.
So we give this Grammy back now. Brad Howell and Sean Davis are the real singers.
And I think they should get this credit.
We'll save Rob Pilatus' story for 1998. We turn to boxing, where Mike Tyson went toe-to-toe with Michael Spinks at the Atlantic City Convention Hall in New Jersey on June 27th. Both fighters were undefeated. It was billed as the mega fight for the ages. But 91 seconds after it began, Spinks went down for the second and final time as Tyson won the mega match by KO.
He leads to the right hand. Down he goes. I don't think he'll get up from this.
Because the greatest love of all inside of me. Yeah. Sexy chocolate.
Happy trails, Hans.
The end of July also marked the end of an era when America's last Playboy Club's doors closed for good. The chain of gentlemen's lounges began on February 29, 1960, when Hugh Hefner opened the first Playboy Club in downtown Chicago. From there, the chain peaked in the 70s, when there were 22 clubs around the world. But by 1986, the Playboy-owned clubs had all closed down. All that was left was a handful of franchise-owned locations scattered around the world. The one in Chicago was the last remaining sign of the swinging 60s in America. In more sad news, well, for Canadians at least, it was announced on August 9th that the great one, Wayne Gretzky, would be traded from the Edmonton Oilers to the Los Angeles Kings.
It would be beneficial for everyone involved to let me play with the Los Angeles Kings.
But after 9 years with Edmonton, it was actually Gretzky who wanted out of Canada. He had just married actress Janet Jones, and the couple were expecting their first child. While the great one did move for Jones, and she definitely got crap for it in the press, there were also rumors that Gretzky left the Oilers after he found out management was shopping his contract around the NHL. 2 days later, a notable and infamous date, as Al-Qaeda was formed during a meeting on August 11th in Peshawar, Pakistan. The meeting was attended by Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, and Syed Imam al-Sharif, aka Dr. Fadl, during the Soviet-Afghan War. Turning to music, in mid-August, Guns N' Roses issued Sweet Child of Mine as the third single off their debut album, Appetite for Destruction. The single immediately shot up the Billboard Hot 100 chart, becoming the band's only #1 U.S. single. The song was written while Slash and drummer Steven Adler were jamming in their West Hollywood apartment. Rhythm guitarist Izzy Stradlin and bassist Duff McKagan liked the riff Slash was noodling on, and they added their own parts to the song. What they didn't know was that Axl Rose was upstairs in his bedroom listening to the band jam. By the following afternoon, Rose had completed the lyrics to the tune, which were inspired by his girlfriend at the time, Erin Everly, daughter of Don Everly of the Everly Brothers. At the end of August, the South African Council of Churches headquarters in Johannesburg, South Africa, were bombed for harboring progressive anti-apartheid groups. The blast injured 19 people. It was discovered later that the then Minister of Law and Order put the hit out on the building after getting his orders directly from South Africa's state president, P.W. Botha. We go now to the Summer Olympics in Seoul, South Korea, where on September 19th, Greg Louganis won the gold medal in 3-meter springboard diving. But what everyone remembers was his preliminary dive.
His weight is too far back, consequently the dive goes straight up. There, as you see, takes that glancing blow to his head.
Despite his injury, Louganis would earn the highest single score of the qualifying round for his next dive. He then repeated the same dive during the finals, which earned him the gold. But what no one knew at the time was that Louganis had tested positive for HIV 6 months earlier, a substantial concern considering he bled in the pool after his preliminary dive. Continuing with the Olympics, Canadian sprinter Ben Johnson ran a world record-setting 9.79 seconds in the 100-meter dash. When stanozolol, a type of steroid, was found in Johnson's urine, the Olympic Committee yoinked his gold medal. The gold was then given to Carl Lewis, who incidentally also tested positive for banned substances, but nothing was ever said or done about it. One last Olympic story. On the final day of the Games on October 2nd, American boxer Roy Jones Jr. properly peppered South Korea's Park Si-hun. Despite outpunching Si-hun 86-32, Jones lost the match, earning a silver medal, while Si-hun got the gold. To no one's surprise, several of the judges had been wined and dined by South Korean organizers. Before lifting Si-hun's arm, referee Aldo Leone turned his head to Jones and said, "I can't believe they're doing this to you." Switching to politics, on October 5th, during the United States vice presidential debate, Senator Dan Quayle teed himself to Senator Lloyd Bentsen when comparing himself to John F. Kennedy.
I have as much experience in the Congress as Jack Kennedy did when he sought the presidency.
Benson's retort,
Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
Despite the burn, George H.W. Bush and Quayle would go on to win the White House nomination. That same day, Chile's president, Army General Augusto Pinochet, accepted his loss of the 1988 Chilean national plebiscite instead of extending his rule for another 8 years. The noes won with 56% of the vote, ending Pinochet's reign of power. But Pinochet wasn't going to go out with dignity. "I'm not leaving, no matter what," he reportedly told advisors. Instead, he demanded that he be given executive power to use the Chilean army to keep hold of power and the capital. General Fernando Mattei refused, saying there was no way in hell he'd ever do anything like that. Pinochet eventually backed off, and fast forward to March 11, 1990, when Chile ushered in Patricio Aylwin, who became the country's first president after 16 and a half years without democracy. It's mid-October. We go to Los Angeles. It's Game 1 of the World Series between the Oakland A's and the Los Angeles Dodgers. It's the bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, and the tying run on first. Dodger manager Tommy Lasorda pinch hits Kirk Gibson against the A's closer Dennis Eckersley. Suffering from 2 injured knees, Gibson hobbled to the plate. With a full count, we get this.
Fly ball into right field. She is gone!
The Dodgers went on to win the series. This was Gibson's one and only at bat, and we think he made the most of it.
Hey, Wall Street, don't panic. I'm only crushing your heads. Crush you.
Moving into November, the Morris worm was unleashed onto the internet by Robert Tappan Morris, a grad student at Cornell University. It wasn't the first computer virus distributed through the internet, but it certainly got the most media attention.
How insidious was this virus? Well, it spread very quickly.
There are reports in newspapers today that it has made its way to Europe and to Australia.
Morris's stunt also resulted in the first felony conviction in the United States under the new Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1986. According to Morris, the worm wasn't written to hack computers. He created it to point out security flaws.
Because he used the extra parts to make his robot friend. Robot roll call, camera, servo, gypsy, crow.
Moving into December, Benazir Bhutto was sworn in as the Prime Minister of Pakistan, a big deal considering she was the first female Prime Minister in a Muslim-majority country. At 35, she was also the youngest elected leader in the Islamic world, as well as the youngest female Prime Minister ever elected.
People of Pakistan have elected the Pakistan People's Party with the largest single majority in the entire country.
Flash forward to December 27, 2007, when al-Qaeda ambushed her while she was out campaigning for the 2008 Pakistani general election. Bhutto was hit with gunfire twice, seconds before a suicide bomb was detonated, killing her and 23 other people.
Thornburg, that's wonderful.
Oh, come, Frank. Everyone should have a friend like you.
Singer Roy Orbison, best known for the songs Only the Lonely, Crying, and Oh Pretty Woman, died on December 6th. Orbison saw a resurgence in his career, teaming up with Tom Petty, George Harrison, Bob Dylan, and Jeff Lynne with the all-star group The Traveling Wilburys. After his death, when you watch the Wilburys video for End of the Line, Orbison is represented by a guitar in a rocking chair. The following day, President Reagan, President-elect George H.W. Bush, and Mikhail Gorbachev met on Governor's Island in New York for Reagan's last U.S.-Soviet summit. It was during this trip that Gorbachev gave a speech that many saw as the end to the Cold War. We go to the Netherlands, where on December 12th, cat burglars stole 3 Vincent van Gogh masterpieces from the Kruller-Müller Museum, including The Potato Eaters, one of my favorites. The paintings were recovered months later, when the thieves gave up on trying to get any ransom for them. Actually, 1988 was the year Van Gogh became the hot artist to rip off. Just months earlier, thieves had swiped vase with carnations from Amsterdam's Stedelijk Museum. All in all, 28 Van Gogh paintings have been stolen since 1988. Animal rights terrorists, the Animal Liberation Front, firebombed Harrods department store in London a little over a week later on December 20th. The blast happened on the 3rd floor at 9 p.m., causing minimal damage and no injuries. Dingles, another store owned by the Al-Fayed brothers in Plymouth, was hit much harder, suffering severe damage which would take years to rebuild. The following day, on December 21st, Pan Am Flight 103 departed on what was a regularly scheduled flight from Frankfurt, West Germany, to Detroit. After the Boeing 747 took off from a stop in London, a bomb exploded on board, killing all 243 passengers and 16 crew members. Debris and shrapnel took the lives of 11 more people on the ground.
It is even worse in daylight than it looked on television at night. Now you can see the full enormity of the damage and the extent of it, and the way in which there's pieces of aircraft and twisted metal scattered over a wide area, and the number of houses that are damaged.
Now called the Lockerbie bombing, targeting the flight was eventually attributed to Libya, with Gaddafi taking the blame and paying compensation to the families. 1989 was only hours away, a year where we would see one man standing up to oppression, the emergence of the kid, and learn it would be a long day living in Reseda. But that is for next year. Coming soon, 1989. 1989. Holy Toledo, we made it to the last timeline video of the 1980s.
Oh my God, this can't be happening to me.
While there were many twists and turns throughout the decade, 1989 stuck the landing. 89 would be remembered for the emergence of democracy and people from all over the world demanding freedom. As communism started to crumble, people started treating it like an unsightly facial mold.
Take this quarter, go downtown, and have a rat gnaw that thing off your face.
Today, we're going to talk about the news, culture, sports, and entertainment, and all that was weird in the 80s. This is Timeline. Today, this one is so fine because it is all about 1989. Now, are you ready for one last run at the 80s?
Captain, my captain.
This is 1989.
That's your edge.
Pop culture got off to a good start in January. On the 3rd, the Arsenio Hall show debuted, which would give the world some unforgettable moments. From the dressing down of Vanilla Ice,
Those that tried to hold the Ice Man down can kiss my wife, A-double-S.
Yep.
to Magic Johnson divulging everything the day after the world found out he was HIV positive.
Having the HIV virus, that I want everybody to practice safe sex.
And of course, Bill Clinton as a red-hot sax machine.
The big man!
Moving on to January 7th, when Hirohito, the Emperor of Japan, died. Hirohito was Japan's longest-reigning emperor. He held the throne from 1926 to 1989, becoming a notable historical figure when he announced Japan's surrender to the Allied forces on August 12, 1945. On January 20th, George Herbert Walker Bush was sworn in as the 41st President of the United States. We're going to see a lot more HW action in the 90s. 3 days later, on January 23rd, the Spanish surrealist Salvador Dali died at the age of 84. While his death certificate says Dali died of heart failure, the last 5 years of the artist's life was rife with mental illness, depression, drug addiction, and Parkinson's-like symptoms. But Dali left an impression on the art world. In February of 2011, when Dali's Portrait de Paul Éluard was won at a Sotheby's auction for a jaw-dropping $22.4 million, the most expensive of Dali's paintings sold, as well as the most expensive surrealist piece of art ever sold. Back to '89, Tone Loc released Loked After Dark, his debut album. The album reached #1 on the Billboard 200 chart, and by spring break, you couldn't turn on MTV without hearing Funky Cold Medina. Tone's second and final album, Cool Hand Loc, sorta tanked, but by then, his second career as an actor was just beginning. On February 4th, 1994, Tone got his first memorable role, playing the straight guy to Jim Carrey in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective.
This is not the time, Mace. If Einhorn come down here and see me talking to you or your ass, I'm history.
Back to the '89 timeline. On January 24th, Ted Bundy was executed at Florida State Prison as hundreds of people just outside the prison walls chanted, sang, danced, and shot off fireworks.
I think society deserves to be protected
from me and from others like me, that's for sure.
Bundy confessed to 30 homicides, but considering he was giving investigators information on new victims up until his departure, the count is almost certainly higher.
Ted Bundy is dead!
Moving into February, the Ayatollah Khomeini ordered all brave Muslims to kill the British Indian writer Salman Rushdie for besmirching the Prophet Muhammad and other aspects of Islam in his 1988 novel, The Satanic Verses. Yep, Rushdie was issued a fatwa. Rushdie lay low and went into hiding for a handful of years, until August 11, 1993, when Rushdie made his first public appearance.
Real devils don't wear horns.
Apparently, Bono had been calling for Salman from the stage throughout U2's Zoo TV tour. When the tour reached London's Wembley Stadium, Bono called out for Rushdie, and when the writer appeared, the stadium erupted.
Salman Rushdie, ladies and gentlemen, I
1 week later, on February 21st, 54 members of the 14K Triad were arrested across the US, Canada, Singapore, and Hong Kong after 820 pounds of China narcotics were seized with a reported street value of $1 billion. In the mid-80s, the Chinese-based gang, which dates from the 19th century, made up 3% of all US heroin sales. By '89, they controlled between 70 and 80% of the game. On February 23rd, Madonna's video for Like a Prayer debuted on MTV and was met with almost immediate backlash. Because of the video's controversy, Madonna lost her spokesperson gig with Pepsi, although she got to keep her $5 million fee, and Like a Prayer went on to #1 on 22 charts, including the Billboard Hot 100 and the UK singles. Everyone won, except Pepsi. Pepsi, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. We go to March, where on the 15th, the Bush administration announced that there would be an indefinite ban on the import of semi-automatic assault rifles. The ban, announced by William J. Bennett, the Director of National Drug Policy, was put into place after the U.S. Drug Enforcement Unit reported that they weren't able to keep up with the heavy artillery drug traffickers used. On March 24th, the Exxon Valdez drifted into Prince William Sound's Bligh Reef, just off the coast of Alaska, and spilled 10.8 million gallons of crude oil into the ocean. Captain Joseph Hazelwood was reported to have been drinking hard that night and was mysteriously missing when the tanker struck the reef. Exxon blamed Hazelwood, and he countered by saying Exxon was using him as a scapegoat. Hazelwood was cleared of all charges, but despite the evidence that pointed to Exxon's fault, the Exxon Valdez disaster will always be tied to the drunken skipper.
In the blink of a cosmic clock, I went from quantum physicist to Air Force test pilot. Here I am, bouncing around in time, putting things right that once went wrong, a sort of time-traveling Lone Ranger with Al as my Tonto.
In late March, in the main courtyard of the Louvre, the glass pyramid made its official debut to, mixed results. Local Parisians hated the design of American architect I.M. Pei, saying it sullied the French Renaissance aesthetic of the Louvre. But just like they got over their hatred for the Eiffel Tower in March of 1889, yeah, they hated that too, Parisians eventually came to accept Pei's pyramids. And if you're a conspiracy enthusiast or a fan of the Da Vinci Code, you're familiar with the story of how the Big Pyramid is built with 666 glass panes. But that is a weird history for another time. Moving into early April, 19-year-old Seattle Mariner rookie Ken Griffey Jr. made his official Major League Baseball debut against the Oakland A's on opening day. The center fielder hit a double in his first Major League at-bat. The kid would go on to homer in his first home game swing at the Kingdome in Seattle 7 days later. We'll see much more of Jr. in the 90s. Speaking of baseball,
Wild Thing delivers. Strike two.
Forget about the curveball, Ricky. Give him a heater.
One last baseball story. On April 8th, Jim Abbott, a pitcher who only had one hand, made his Major League Baseball debut on April 8th when he faced the Seattle Mariners at Angel Stadium. Abbott got racked in his first game in the Bigs, giving up 6 runs in a 7-0 loss. But Angels fans still gave him a standing ovation as he was pulled from the game in the 5th inning. Flash forward to September 4th, 1993, when he was pitching for the Yankees and threw a no-hitter.
He did it! He did it! No-hitter for Jim Abbott!
Staying with sports, on April 15th, 96 people died and another 766 sustained serious injuries during an FA Cup semifinal between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest. With the match already in play, an estimated 5,000 supporters rushed to enter Hillsborough Stadium at once, most filling the sections directly behind the west goal. Then the crush began. Following the disaster, officials lied to the media, stating that the entire incident was due to football hooligans and widespread drunkenness by Liverpool supporters. The Taylor report found that the main cause of the disaster was due to the South Yorkshire Police Department's failure to control the crowd. 4 days later, on the 19th, Tricia Miley was found late at night in critical condition after being assaulted and left for dead in Central Park. Local detectives illegally interrogated dozens of suspects and then chose 5: Kevin Richardson, Anton McRae, Raymond Santana, Corey Wise, and Yusef Salam, who came to be known as the Central Park Five. Real estate developer Donald J. Trump took out full-page ads in New York City asking for the death penalty.
Of course I hate these people. And let's all hate these people, because maybe hate is what we need if we're going to get something done.
Despite a lack of physical evidence, the members of the Central Park Five received 5 to 15 years in prison. Flash forward when Matthias Reyes confessed to the Central Park attack. And then flash forward again to 2014, when the Central Park Five won a $41 million settlement after suing the city of New York for malicious prosecution, racial discrimination, and emotional distress.
Now it feels great to have a voice, because in '89 we didn't have one.
We go to the Caribbean Sea, where a 16-inch gun turret of the United States Navy battleship USS Iowa exploded while on maneuvers, killing 47 American sailors. An initial investigation by the U.S. Navy was leaked and reported that crew member Clayton Hartwig deliberately caused the explosion after his sexual relationship with fellow crew member Kendall Truitt suddenly ended. However, the families of the victims and members of Congress questioned the findings of the Navy. A second investigation by the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House Armed Services Committees both found that an accidental overram of the powder bags in the turret most likely was the cause of the explosion. 5 days later, on April 24th, Tom Petty released Full Moon Fever, his first solo album since he formed the Heartbreakers in 1976. It wasn't completely a solo LP, though. Petty got contributions from the Heartbreakers' Mike Campbell, as well as ELO's Jeff Lynne, Beatles' George Harrison, as well as Roy Orbison. Petty's debut eventually went 5 times platinum, thanks to the 5 incredibly successful singles, I Won't Back Down, Runnin' Down a Dream, and of course, Free Fallin', which he performed at the MTV Music Video Awards in 1989 with Axl Rose. In late April, Sergio Leone, the Italian film director who is credited as the creator of the spaghetti western, died from a heart attack at the age of 60. Leone's Dollars trilogy, featuring Clint Eastwood in A Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, are enough to designate him as one of the greatest and most influential directors in the history of cinema. Entering May, Michael Jordan made The Shot, which happened during Game 5 of the Eastern Conference First Round Series at Richfield Coliseum in Ohio. Down by 1 point with 3 seconds left on the clock, Jordan got the ball and...
Jordan with 2 seconds to go, puts it up and scores at the buzzer! Michael Jordan has won it for Chicago!
An iconic NBA moment. How did MJ do it?
Money's gotta be the shoes!
In what will become a theme for the next few years, Dan Quayle made one of his earliest gaffes as the Vice President of the United States when he gave a speech at a United Negro College Fund conference, and these words stumbled out of his mouth.
And you take the UNCF motto that what a waste it is to lose one's mind or not to have a mind is being very wasteful.
Quayle was referring to the United Negro College Fund's tagline,
"A mind is a terrible thing to waste."
Hey, that was Marlon Wayans. Hang tight, you'll see a lot more of Quayle saying silly stuff soon.
Right boot. Sorry, we're closed. Well, then what are all these people doing here? Drinking and having a good time. Well, that's why we're here. You're too stupid to have a good time.
It would be on May 22nd when O.J. Simpson pleaded no contest and submitted the plea to 1 count of spousal battery to charges that he beat his wife Nicole Brown at their Brentwood home. The 90s and O.J., we will definitely see you again.
The penitent man will pass. Penitent man is humble. Kneels before God. Kneel!
On June 4th, Poland held its first party-free election under communist rule in over 40 years, allowing the Solidarity trade union to defeat the Communist Party at the polls. The result of this election began the collapse of communism and the early stages of political change not only in Poland, but across Central and Eastern Europe. The following day, on June 5th, this unidentified Chinese man stood in front of a convoy of Type 59 tanks attempting to leave Tiananmen Square, the day after the Chinese military had suppressed the area's protests by force. To this day, little is known of Tank Man. Bruce Hershenson, the former deputy special assistant to President Nixon, alleged that the unidentified man was executed 14 days after the incident, while others claimed he was killed by firing squad several months later in the year. In mid-June, actor and socialite Zsa Zsa Gabor took her $215,000 Rolls-Royce out for a spin and ended up getting pulled over by a Beverly Hills motorcycle cop for expired car registration tags. While Officer Paul Kramer was looking for additional violations, Gabor drove off. When Kramer chased her down and pulled her over for the second time, Gabor Zsa Zsa'd the officer's face, stating she was acting in self-defense after he yanked her out of her car. Ultimately, Zsa Zsa was ordered to serve 3 days in jail. She had to pay every fine and retribution totaling $12,937, and she had to perform 120 hours of community service.
They can take away my husband, they can take away my driver's license, but darling, don't touch my wheel.
Don't touch my wheel.
3 days later, on June 21st, in a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the landmark decision stating that burning the American flag as a political protest was protected by the First Amendment. The ruling came after the Texas versus Johnson Supreme Court case, where Joey Johnson, then a member in the Revolutionary Communist Youth Brigade, set an American flag on fire at a political demonstration during the 1984 Republican National Convention. The swing vote provided by Judge Antonin Scalia. Although Scalia voted in favor of Johnson's free speech, the judge was often heard grumbling about the case. More than once, Scalia mentioned that if he were king, he'd imprison anyone who desecrated the American flag, and called Johnson a bearded weirdo.
Don't kill me, man! Don't kill me! Don't kill me, man!
I'm not going to kill you. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
What are you?
I'm Batman.
In a second landmark court case in less than a week, the United States Supreme Court ruled on June 26 that, based on the Stanford versus Kentucky case, upheld the possibility of the death penalty for teens who were at least 16 years old at the time of their crime. Since the Supreme Court's 1989 decision, 19 teenagers have been executed. The majority of those have been 17, most are from the South, most die by lethal injection, and all are male.
See, now to me that button's in the worst possible spot. The second button literally makes or breaks the shirt. Look at it. It's too high. It's in no man's land. You look like you live with your mother. Are you through?
July 10th, Mel Blanc, the man of 1,000 voices, died at 81. According to Blanc, he began smoking at 9 years old, continuing his pack-a-day habit until he was diagnosed with emphysema at 77. Mel was the voice of so many iconic cartoon characters, from Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck to Porky Pig, Barney Rubble, and Speedy Gonzales. We go to the sky, where Captain Al Haynes, pilot of United Airlines Flight 232, was cruising at an altitude of 37,000 feet over Iowa when the tail-mounted engine on his DC-10 disintegrated, forcing a crash landing in Sioux City. With very limited ability to control the plane, Haynes landed the large 3-engine airliner, carrying 292 passengers and crew. While 111 people on board perished in the disaster, Captain Haynes and his crew were heralded as heroes. But to Haynes, it was just another day on the job.
There is no hero. They're just a group of 4 people who did their job.
At the end of July, Game Boy would make its American debut and take handheld gaming to an entirely different level. But it wasn't always like that. The unit wasn't very popular in its early stages. Some Nintendo developers even called it Dame Game, with the word dame being Japanese for hopeless or lame. But Americans loved their Game Boys. They bought 40,000 units on the first day alone. With the Cold War coming to a close, the world's biggest heavy metal artists decided to band together to perform at the Moscow Music Peace Festival, which took place over the weekend beginning on August 12th. Some of the era's best hair bands performed that weekend, promoting world peace and established international cooperation in fighting the drug war in Russia. Ironic, considering the bill featured Skid Row, Motley Crue, Ozzy, and the Scorpions, bands who never really listen when asked to just say no. On August 20th, Lyle and Eric Menendez murdered their parents in cold blood in the family's Beverly Hills mansion. After spending an estimated $700,000 of their deceased father's fortune on Porsches, Rolexes, and restaurants, one of them bought a restaurant, detectives arrested the brothers off of a tip from Lyle's psychologist's mistress. Fast forward to July 2nd, 1996, when the brothers Menendez were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole after a lengthy trial televised on Court TV.
Does she always smell that good? Kelly? Kapowski? Hey, you don't want anything to do with her. But why not? She has leprosy.
On August 24th, Pete Rose accepted a lifetime ban from Major League Baseball handed down by the new commissioner of baseball, A. Bartlett Giamatti. The Cincinnati Reds manager was charged with betting on Major League Baseball games, which started in 1985, and at least 52 of his own team's games in 1987, dropping up to $10,000 a day on his wagers. Giamatti's ban rendered all of Charlie Hustle's on-field accomplishments as null and void. More on Commissioner Giamatti in a minute. Leona Helmsley, the billionaire hotelier and shady real estate investor, was convicted of federal income tax evasion on August 30th. She was being sued by a group of contractors for refusing to pay services rendered to her 21-room mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. Her former housekeeper testified that she once heard Helmsley scream, "We don't pay taxes, only the little people pay taxes." Also known as the Queen of Mean, Helmsley got off light. Helmsley only served 19 months of a 16-year prison sentence and an additional 2 under house arrest. 7 days after he banned Pete Rose from Major League Baseball, Commissioner A. Bartlett Giamatti died of a heart attack at his summer home in Martha's Vineyard. He was 51. Giamatti had only been the MLB's commissioner for 5 months, but he would appear again in a most unlikely place. Flash forward to October 22, 2004, when the film Sideways debuted. Bartlett's real son, Paul, playing Miles, used a real photograph of father and son Giamatti, which you can see here on his mother's dresser. Sideways. That was a pretty good movie. Back to 1989, where on September 6th, Madonna performed Express Yourself at the MTV Video Music Awards. Madonna's choreography for Express Yourself is absolutely charming compared to what pop stars do on stage today to get noticed. But in 1989, a woman grabbing herself, dry humping the microphone stand, and wearing a black lace bustier over men's baggy trousers was all it took to throw conservative groups like the PMRC and Parents Television Council into a tailspin.
See if Kathy learned anything from the earlier 2 contenders' experiences.
She might feel a little more comfortable on ice skates.
Quit eyeballing your dog, because on September 18th, California Governor George Deukmejian signed a bill making it illegal in the Golden State to eat household pets, specifically, but not limited to, dogs and cats. Makes sense, but man, slow-roasted Charlie? That's a good dog.
All right. You're okay. All right. It's a little boy. It's a little baby boy.
At the beginning of October, Denmark became the first country in the world to legally recognize same-sex marriages in the form of registered partnerships. Not bad, considering the country viewed homosexuality as an illness up to 1981. Another first took place on October 3rd when Art Shell became the first black man to be hired as an NFL head coach. Shell, a former offensive tackle with the Raiders from 1968 to 1982, returned to the team as the head coach until the 1994 season, only to return in 2006. On October 9th, TASS, the Soviet Union's central news agency, confirmed that a UFO had landed in a park in the city of Voronezh, approximately 300 miles southeast of Moscow. The TASS report noted the spacecraft contained 3 creatures, similar to humans, and a small robot, which all exited the UFO and explored the grounds. The report also noted their height, between 9 and 12 feet tall, and the size of their heads, very small, and their eyes, 3 of them. The report failed to report the date of the Voronezh alien visit, but 40 or so Soviet witnesses, adults and children, were consumed with fear that lasted for several days. In mid-October, Wayne Gretzky, the Great One, passed Gordie Howe's scoring record of 1,850 goals in a game against the team that traded him, the Edmonton Oilers, at Edmonton. Gretzky's 1,000 and the fact that his former hometown fans got to be there for it was a nice touch by the hockey gods. Staying with sports, we go to Game 3 of the Bay Bridge World Series between the Oakland A's and the San Francisco Giants, which was interrupted by a 6.9 earthquake.
Second base, so the Oakland A's take.
I'll tell you what, we're having an earthquake.
The quake killed 67 people and caused more than $5 billion in damages. But experts stated that potentially thousands of lives were saved because most Bay Area residents were inside, getting ready to watch the game. We flash forward to October 27th, when play resumed when the Athletics beat the Giants 13-7, eventually sweeping San Francisco in 4 games the following day on October 28th. Later in the month, as part of their plant's opening celebration in Orrville, Ohio, Smith Dairy made and served the world's largest milkshake on record. The 1,575.2-gallon shake earned Smith Dairy a spot in that year's edition of Guinness Book of World Records. Heading into November, on the 9th, the Berlin Wall came down. The Berlin Wall had divided East and West Berlin since 1961. The event marked the fall of the Iron Curtain and hinted at the eventual fall of communism in Eastern and Central Europe. In related news, an eventual end of the dying Cold War was declared at the Malta summit 3 weeks later. But of course, one of the most memorable moments of the wall's fall, and to be honest, all of the 80s, was David Hasselhoff rocking the hell out of his single "Looking for Freedom" in a piano scarf and electric black leather jacket.
I've been looking for freedom. I've been looking so long.
The world was going through some massive changes in November. On the 17th, the Velvet Revolution began in Czechoslovakia as thousands of student protesters filled the streets of Prague, peacefully demanding freedom from their country's communist government. In the following days, these students were joined by other Czech citizens, and 3 days later, on November 20th, over 500,000 Czechs and Slovaks filled Prague's streets and took over Wenceslas Square, demanding an end to communism. The peaceful protests, which lasted until December 29th, worked. Czechoslovakia's communists were forced out of power, and during the final days of 1989, the Czechs elected Václav Havel, their first president since 1948. Staying with the then communist nations, on November 24th, Romanian leader Nicolae Ceausescu was unanimously re-elected Communist Party chief. It didn't last for long, because a month later to Christmas, December 25th, when Nicolae Ceausescu and his wife Elena were charged with genocide during the revolution in Timișoara. Ceausescu was found guilty, and he and his wife were swiftly escorted to an outdoor wall. Before news crews or reporters could record the execution, the firing squad fired, thus officially ending Romania's reign of communism. Well, that was fast.
You girls just stay here and relax.
Remember, Dad, the handle of the Big Dipper points to the North Star.
That's nice, Lisa, but we're not in astronomy class. We're in the woods.
We said there would be more quail. On December 19th, the vice president mailed out a batch of 30,000 Christmas cards, and in true Dan Quayle fashion, the holiday greeting inside the card included a fairly glaring typo. Quayle wrote, "May our nation continue to be the beacon of hope in the world." But somewhere between his mouth and the printer's, beacon was spelled with a K, B-E-A-K-O-N. Quayle shifted blame onto his wife Marilyn, what a guy, who in turn blamed Denise Balzano, Mrs. Quayle's chief of staff. The following day, on the 20th, the United States invasion of Panama. During the month-long invasion, the Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega fled to a Catholic sovereign entity, staying there for 10 days, while American soldiers blared tunes from AC/DC, The Clash, and Guns N' Roses around the clock. And speaking of music, on December 23rd, 17-year-old Ice Cube left NWA, the band he co-founded with Eazy-E and Dr. Dre, after getting iced out by Jerry Heller, the rap group's manager, over royalties. But Cube had a legitimate reason for breaking away and going solo. He wrote the majority of NWA's debut, Straight Outta Compton, and all of Eazy's Easy Does It for combined sales of over 5 million albums. Ice Cube earned a total of $32,000 for all of those sales. Flash forward to May 16, 1990, when Ice Cube released America's Most Wanted. Most assumed Cube's debut would bomb, but it was universally praised by critics. It immediately went platinum, and it set up a rap rivalry between NWA and Cube, which produced some of the greatest rap beef tracks in the history of hip-hop. And with that, Ice Cube would be the last story of the 80s. The 80s. It was a beautiful time, and we hope you enjoy this trip down memory lane. Be sure to watch or rewatch all of our Timeline 80s videos from 1980 through 1989. But we know why you're still here. What decade will Timeline do next? The 90s, 70s, 50s? Well, we've seen plenty of comments and even did a poll. We're going to take a break in between decades, but in the not-so-distant future, Season 2 of Timeline will be the 90s. But before that, we will be doing a special edition of Timeline. That is, if we make it. Coming soon, Timeline 2020. Boom. We will see you soon. So what do you think? What was your favorite story from Timeline the 80s? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these only about the 1980s videos of our weird history.